Welcome, everybody, to the first of its kind, the first ever members-only live stream. Now, this will be made available to the public afterwards, but for now, it's just you and me, maybe a special guest. We can talk about the Seahawks offseason up until this point. We can talk about what lies ahead, what you like about the roster, what you don't like about the roster. I can ask you what your draft crushes are. We can talk about just anything we want to, even non-football stuff. You want to do some food takes or some pop culture or some movie, music tastes, we can do that too. Just no politics, no religion, none of that stuff. Just keep it all in good fun. And I understand that this is March Madness, just not something I'm really into anymore. So we'll call this alternative programming tonight, talking Seahawks, members only on Seahawks Forever.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
All right, you guys, let's start it off this way. This episode brought to you by the folks at Doer, built for doing lifestyle apparel for every occasion. They have flagship stores in Denver and Los Angeles, but you can get everything on shopdoer.com, and that's spelled D-U-E-R. Hoodies, joggers, premium t-shirts, polos, Henleys, moleskin shirts, and these bad boys right here, these are just about a daily go-to for me, although it's getting hot down here in the desert, so I'm wearing more shorts. These things have 20% stretch. They're incredibly light and flexible. They move with you, but they are also built tough. They're built for doing, so you can use them for anything that you might wear jeans for. And right now, Doer's going to give you 20% off your first order for being a viewer of this program. So go to shopdoer.com/forever for 20% off your first order. That's shopdoer, DUER.com/forever for 20% off your first order. All right, you guys, welcome back. Welcome to you, members of the channel. If you're watching this afterwards, when it's parked on the YouTube channel. I've got the link down in the description below that'll explain everything, all the different tiers of memberships that you can sign up for. I'll be doing more of this members only exclusive content to reward you for supporting me and the program. All the other ways you can support the show are down below as well. But the best way you can support it, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Although if you're watching this and you're a member, certainly you've already done it. But if you're new to the program, subscribe to it, hit that bell so you're always notified of things like this. Boom, you get a little pop-up and you know to hop in here if there's an emergency podcast or just something's on my mind or we get a live feed or what have you. So welcome, guys. Welcome in. Yeah, that's what we're going to do today. A couple of newsy notes to catch up on. Seahawks did technically make a couple of signings today. Linebacker Josh Ross, mostly a special teams guy, but someone that Mike McDonald has worked with in the past, and maybe he sees enough there to think he could contribute as an off-ball linebacker as well. He was officially signed. We knew that was coming, though. He was signed to the practice squad late last season, and we had heard that he was going to come back. He was one of those restricted free agents that instead of tendering him, they just signed him to a new deal, similar to Josh Jobe. And then the other signing, one of my favorite Coug players of all time, like hands down. And I'm a Coug, if you didn't know. Riq Woolen, who I have just had so much fun watching his journey. He's a guy that just, had to overcome a whole lot of odds. His senior season, when he was starting to get a little bit of draft buzz, suffered a torn ACL, I think in the bowl game. If it wasn't in the bowl game, it was in the final regular season game, late in his final season at Wazoo. Just an outstanding possession receiver, but he had a little bit more shake and sizzle to him than that. And then to just see him go from practice squad to practice squad to practice squad and keep fighting, and then ended up working his way into a pretty significant role in Miami. I mean, for a minute there, it looked like he was wide receiver 3, maybe wide receiver 4 at worst, behind obviously Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. He's 30 years old now. This wasn't a significant signing. And of course, when it was announced today by the Seahawks, you got a whole bunch of BS from casual fans online bitching about how it's not an offensive lineman, or how come we're, a 30-year-old journeyman receiver supposed to replace DK Metcalf, all the predictable stuff that shouldn't piss me off, that I shouldn't let piss me off anymore. But I do, especially when it's in reference to a Coug. So really, really fun player. He's got an outside shot to make the roster because he just recently, again, had a legitimate role in Miami for that offense down there. He's also done some punt returning as well, very sure-handed. And so he might figure a little bit into that as well. But just a really, really fun signing. Still waiting on Sam Darnold, DeMarcus Lawrence. Not going to call him Dexter anymore. And obviously Cooper Kupp. We're still waiting for those contracts to hit the cap, but everything else has up until this point. Guys like Josh Ross and Riq Woolen, they don't impact the cap. Just a reminder that the cap only accounts for the top 51 paid players on the roster. And once you get down to 51, they're all making the minimum. So you sign one and it just drops another guy off, and it doesn't impact the cap yet. Now, not until you get closer to the season. So, but everyone else is hit. And at this point, Seahawks are sitting there with $64 million in cap space. One of the things we could talk about tonight, if you want to, is they're going to have a lot of cap space left over even after those contracts hit. Presumably, I've heard estimates. The most conservative estimate I saw was they're still going to have $30-ish million in cap space available. What are they going to do with that? There is a thought out there among some fans that it's wasted money unless you spend it. I tend to disagree with that. I kind of feel like I know where they're headed, and leaving themselves with a lot more flexibility for the future than other teams. But we can talk about that and get into that as well. I think that's it. I mean, I'll keep popping in on Twitter just to see if there's any crazy late breaking news. Maybe they'll sign one of those guards that are still out there. We'll certainly, I'm sure we're going to talk about offensive line here as well. Had a guest lined up tonight that had to postpone at the last minute. I'm not going to tell you who it is, but a very, very prominent person, I'll just put it that way, and someone who was very, 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 how many varies was that? 5? That'll work. familiar with NFL offensive line play, and is going to join me on the show, but had a family commitment come up at the last minute, so we're going to reschedule that. So stay tuned for that. Not going to tell you who it is. Even, I mean, members only go so far, but stay tuned for that. Got some really great guests lined up for next week as well. Plan to take tomorrow off. I'm going to go catch a spring training game, I think. But, if there's breaking news, anything to react to, certainly I'll do that. You can always follow me on Twitter. In the meantime, at Seahawks Forever, with some of the cool growth that I've experienced on this channel since I've been able to go full time, the Twitter engagement has really gone to a new level too. After 15 years, basically, of my Twitter following, my follower base, I guess you would call it, kind of flatlining. Lots of new followers, lots of new engagement and debate and conversation. I love it, you guys. So follow me there if you don't already. Let's hop into these comments and see who's here and what we got going on. Some of the usual suspects. Love to see you guys here. Right off the bat, we get a special teams question. I like this. Dune Moose. It's a two-parter. Are the Seahawks going to sue on their punt returner from the tail end of last year? And when I first read this, I thought, sue him? What did he do? He means stick with. Are the Seahawks going to stick with their punt returner from the end of last year? So that was Jalen Darden. It was kind of a cool pickup at the end of last year. They had issues at that spot throughout the season, and they got him. Was he waived, or did they poach him off the practice squad? I think he was waived, and they claimed him on waivers from the Cleveland Browns, and he handled punt return duties for the last handful of games. He was involved with the team up until the very end. There was a wide receiver and tight end Christmas party that I was involved with, and he was there and interacting with those guys. But to this point, he hasn't been re-signed, and judging by how they've handled the rest of their restricted free agents, if they were going to bring him back, I think they would have brought him back by now. So I think they must have other ideas. I will say this: he's a guy that, until he's signed, I think he would still be in play, because I think he did a nice job. Had a couple nice returns, but he was just sure-handed. Didn't have any muffs or fumbles or anything like that. After, oh my gosh, D. Williams, right? Oof, what a debacle that was. But I also think they have a clearer picture now of sort of how they want to handle the kickoff return stuff too. There is some talk in some of the rule changes that have been bounced around among the league so far that they might tweak that again. There weren't enough returns last year. They might move the penalty out to the 35 if the ball doesn't land in the landing zone. But, I'd have to go back and chart it. But I feel like at the beginning of the season, the Seahawks were pretty aggressive about trying to bring the ball out and then and also kicking it in the landing zone to let other people return it. And I think near the end of the year, they got a little bit more conservative when it came to that. I think some other teams did too. There were a lot of teams that just kicked the ball out of the end zone, didn't allow for a potential return. So we'll see how that rule change impacts anything. And maybe they're waiting on that before they go invest in a veteran for that. But it's certainly a skill set, because we know they're going to be acquiring other wide receivers. River Craycraft can return punts in a pinch if he makes the roster. But also there's a bunch of guys in this draft class that can do that. In fact, if you were to sort of look at this draft class as a whole, compared to, say, the last 3 or 4, which were very, very, very good. And no, we're not playing a drinking game tonight where you drink every time I say the word very. It's just kind of the way it's going so far. But it's a wide receiver class that tends to be what's the word I'm looking for? It's smaller dudes. It is kind of the overriding style of player, and some of those guys have return ability, so might be a skill set that they're looking for in the draft. I'd rather be flying an X-wing. How's it going? Seems like we're likely done with free agency until cap casualty roster cut season. Any potential player trades you have your eye on? I'm glad you brought that up. I think people forget about that as a pretty significant phase of offseason. There's 3 or 4 big windows for acquiring talent, right? There's re-signing your own. And then there's, I guess there's kind of an initial phase where players are released and they're just free for anyone to sign because they've been released. They don't have to wait for their contracts to expire. They don't have to wait for the start of free agency. So that's one phase. And then there's obviously official free agency. That's a big phase. And then there's the second and third kind of waves of free agency. Then there's the draft. And then after the draft, there are players that are made available for trade because they've checked the boxes they wanted to check in free agency and the draft. And then there are cap casualties of players that are getting up in age. Maybe just the production doesn't match the dollar value, and the team isn't cash strapped necessarily. But once they go through free agency and the draft, they realize that, okay, we need the cap savings more than we need this player. There will be, as of June 1st, more salary cap casualties and some veterans that become available. Now, I will say this. Let's hope the Seahawks aren't in that market, because if they're looking to sign, and I know what everyone's thinking, right? But I guess this could apply to a couple other positions too: safety, corner, wide receiver. But specifically with the offensive line is everyone's focus of interest right now. If the Seahawks are out there similar to last year where they signed Laken Tomlinson kind of late in the game, then that would be a big fail, right? Right now I can sit here and I can tell you, I can talk to you for an hour about how I think their process up until this point in regards to the offensive line has been sound. And while it's not where any of us really want it to be, it's also, they're not finished. They're not finished building the building, right? The scaffolding is still up. And so if they get to June 1st and they're still looking for a veteran offensive lineman, then that's a big fail. I don't anticipate that's going to be an issue. Now, the trade thing, I just think anyone worthwhile that a team might want to give up on. First of all, interior offensive linemen, we see it all across the league. John Schneider said the words out loud, dearth of talent at that position, but every team knows it and they all act like it. And so you can see how they're scrambling to sign these guys that have failed, right? Will Fry's got a bunch of money, and the Colts tried to re-sign him, but they obviously didn't make a very big push. The Bears made no effort to re-sign Tevin Jenkins, and in fact went and remade their entire interior offensive line. The Colts let Fries and Ryan Kelly walk. Dylan Radins, was allowed to let walk by the Titans, even though he was a fairly high draft pick of theirs. So these guys that we're all pining for, there's a reason they're available. And so, as the Seahawks try to figure out how best to acquire a veteran, because I do believe they want to, we need to have an experienced person in that room. That's why they brought Laken Tomlinson in last year. Just unfortunately, they also then decided, and I hope this was Scott Huff's decision, because now we can't blame him anymore, that Tomlinson ended up starting all 17 games. Like, it's unfortunate that had to happen. I don't think that'll be the case this year. And I do think you're right, X-Wing. I think that, to me, the guy that made the most sense was Lucas Patrick. He signs with the Bengals today, $2.1 million. Because, and I've compared him to Evan Brown in the past, former Seahawk. He's a guy that can play center and guard. And so that was the guy that made sense. Like, to me, now, anyone left on the free agent market, you have to ask yourself, are they better than what we have? Does Dylan Radins have a better floor or ceiling than Christian Haynes, Tao Lamea, Anthony Bradford, right? And so I think anyone that might be available in trade is either A, damaged goods, we don't want them, or B, they've been traded. Now, the one thing that in hindsight we can look back on and question legitimately is if Joe Thuney was available, and he obviously was. He went to the Bears for what, a third-round pick? Did the Seahawks know he was available? Did the Bears call the Chiefs on a whim and the Chiefs said, yeah, and they put it together? Did they not shop Thuney? I think that surprised us all when they traded him, so maybe that's the case. But if Joe Thuney was available for a third-round pick and the Seahawks had all the cap space in the world to be able to fit him in, wouldn't he have been the perfect left guard to bring in a veteran that can still play at a high level? And we know that they like Thuney because in 2021, when he was a free agent before he signed with the Chiefs, they made a pitch. They went after him pretty hard. He's one of those guys fans forget about when they say John never tries to get He tried to sign Joe Thuney. He tried to sign Corey Linsley, the best center in the league at the time, that same year. That's one guy that, we'll probably never know. There's been no reporting along these lines. Did the Seahawks know Thuney was available? If they did, then it's unfortunate that they couldn't lock him up. A couple of starred. There's Bryce. Thank you so much for your donation, my friend. Here, I'm going to do this, actually, by the way. I'm sending you a Twitter message right now. You know what to do with it. All right? Thank you, Bryce. If you don't know, Bryce co-host of the Hawk Zone Rundown podcast, which I was going to wear the hat tonight, actually, but it's got anything with green in it now. I can't wear it with the green screen. It'll look all funky. But it does a great job over there on that podcast. And that is now part of Field Goals as well and affiliated with them. So that's pretty fantastic. Thank you for the super thanks from Matthew McManus. Sup, Dan? On every mock draft I've done, I've taken Eftim Chisholm with my last pick. Oh, he's the receiver from Eastern Washington, right? Just based on his stats. Today I saw his pro day footage. Wow, he's no joke. Have you scouted him yet? I haven't. I need to. There's been a lot of buzz about him since they signed Cooper Kupp, right? Could we have 2 Eastern Washington Eagles? I need to look into him. I did see that he didn't go to the combine. I thought I saw a really poor 40 time from him. But he's a guy that I need to look into. And so thank you for reminding me. Tomorrow actually was a day that, since I'm not planning a show and I've got the entire day free, I'm trying to decide if I want to go to a spring training game tomorrow or Sunday. I think I might actually go Sunday because it's home. It's in Peoria. That'd be easier to get to. I'm just going to watch film all day. And so there's a bunch of guys, there's another guy from Arkansas that people have been hitting me up about. Is it Armstrong, wide receiver? I need to check him out. There's some smaller school guys now that some of you are letting me know about. I mean, that's how much fans are into this now, right? Like they can do this stuff on their own now. You can find all 22 and you can look on YouTube and you can, you can see all the PFF grades and read all the scouting reports and do mock drafts. So I will definitely look into him. And right now, where I left off the other day with my film watching is I'm focusing on offense now. And so wide receivers is kind of where I left off. Because, for obvious reasons, right? We need to find one in the draft. So thanks, you guys. Bryce, by the way, again, check your Twitter DMs there. All right, let's see what else we got. We got a nice turnout here tonight. 180 of you so far. There's one person who I always get one streamer from Twitch. I never do anything on Twitch. I just kind of added it, and I always get one. So say hello if you're in there, so I can acknowledge you. Fred says, thanks for a great show. Thanks for being here, Fred. Martin Todd Smith says, I'm watching Illini basketball. Perfectly understandable. Even though I'm just not into college basketball anymore, or basketball as a whole. If my Cougs were in the tournament and they were playing right now, I wouldn't be doing a live stream. So, I would be interested enough. Priorities. I do miss that. Like I used to love all sports. I mean, when I was young, like, and I know I'm going to age myself here or date myself. Is that the proper term? Age myself. I'd get up in the morning, I'd make my breakfast, and I would open the newspaper and I would read all the agate type, all the box scores every single day. I knew, the standings of every division in every major sports league. And I mean, every major sport. I would get up early and watch all the big PGA tournaments. I would watch all the tennis tournaments and Wimbledon and basketball and baseball and all the Olympic sports, like all of it. But now, in part because, there's just, I never thought I'd hear myself saying this. There's more to life than sports. But also doing this, like this is my focus now. But even before then, some of the reasons that I just don't get into that stuff anymore is I just don't like the quality of play as much anymore. Gosh, I used to love boxing when I was like high school, college age, but boxing barely exists anymore. It's certainly not what it used to be. And, maybe golf and tennis I just lost interest in those. But I think basketball is the best example where and this is the kind of stuff we can talk about today. Again, at non-football questions are totally fine. I used to love basketball. And then we lost the Sonics. And that was such a crushing blow. But it came at a time where right as that was happening, the league was changing, and I just don't like the product anymore. Like I don't, the big news the last couple of days, the Celtics sold for $6.1 billion. That was kind of the last step the league was waiting to finalize. They knew it was coming, and then the new TV deal and everything else. Now they can move forward with expansion because now they can ask $6 billion for the franchise fee, and we're going to get the Sonics back. And I hate to say this, but I don't care. Like, I just don't like the NBA as a product anymore. It's all individual. It's all threes. It's, nobody, there's no running game anymore. Nobody passes the ball. There's no motion offense. It's a very, very selfish game because everyone's trying to get max contracts. And, 30 years ago, people used to say they didn't play defense in the NBA. But my goodness, now it's they don't even think about defense. I just don't like the style of play anymore. And that's only exacerbated by the fact that free agency just got so out of control. I blame LeBron for this, bringing all his buddies together in Miami. Now everybody wants to do that. So every single year, every roster changes. There's no continuity. The beauty of the late 80s and early and mid 90s in the NBA was teams stuck together. Every single team in the league had a core of 3 to 5 guys. And so if you saw on the schedule, the Atlanta Hawks were coming into town tonight, you knew, they got, Dominique Wilkins. And I mean, you just knew their core. It also made it harder. It was harder back then because teams did stay together. Kind of like we talk about with the offensive line, right? They knew each other. They knew how to play team defense. They knew each other's tendencies on offense. It was just it was a more physical game, and it was a prettier game to watch because players are familiar with each other and teams had an identity. And now you just don't. You don't even know who's who anymore. And then college basketball, it's filtered down to that now with the 1-year rule, and guys don't stay anymore, and then they transfer. And so you just can't. Same reason. I remember, God, I don't know what age I was. I'd have to look it up. But whenever Rex Chapman was at Kentucky, I just loved his game so much. And I remember there was a random Saturday and I turned on the TV. It was CBS Sports and Louisville was playing Kentucky. And I immediately wanted to watch that game because I knew 8 of the players that were playing in that game. And I was a Pacific Northwest kid. That doesn't exist anymore, right? Like you have to continually refresh the rosters and learn who's even on your own team. Every single year, I have to learn an entire new roster of WSU players. And so that's kind of ruined it for me too. A little bit of a tangent there on basketball, but I mean to say that with the utmost respect. Like March Madness I used to be as into it as any of you, and I get it. It's if I wasn't doing this, I'd probably be watching it. Now that although if I wasn't doing this, I'd still be back in my full-time career and I wouldn't be able to watch. So, hey, I said we might have a special guest, right? Hey, look at this guy. Let's do this. What's up, Bryce?
How's it going? It's weird. I was in the comments and now I'm live here. It's awesome.
See what you get. You see, when you're a member, you can just pop in on one of these and maybe I'll just invite you into the stream.
It's great.
Even if you're not a podcaster, maybe we'll do that at some point. Just roll the dice and just like let somebody in and just hope that I hope this goes well.
Hope it works out.
I'm good, man. How are you?
Oh, not too bad.
Are you into the March Madness?
I actually was hearing your whole speech on it, and I used to be as well. And basketball for me as a whole, even the NBA, I don't find it nearly as interesting as it used to be to watch. And I've kind of fallen out of love with it. Like I used to love watching, like I obviously am from Vancouver. I wasn't even a Grizzlies fan when they were here. I was a Supersonics fan, like Ray Allen and, Gary Payton and that whole crew is what I grew up. And I was a big fan of the Supersonics. And when they left, it was kind of the end of my basketball. Like I follow a few teams here and there and players, but it kind of just became a thing where like, oh, if it's on and there's no football stuff to watch, sure, I'll watch it. But yeah, I don't find it the same as it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. Gosh, Vancouver, man, the Grizzlies. Who was it Bryant Reeves? What was
Yep, Big Country.
From Oklahoma State, right?
Yep, Big Country Reeves.
I used to know my basketball.
I remember I grew up. So the first I got given on my birthday a Grizzlies jersey, and it was a Mike Bibby Grizzlies jersey.
Oh, Bibby, yeah.
Yeah, we had Mike Bibby up here, and we had the whole Steve Francis issue up here where he didn't want to play here, and he ended up in Houston because he never wanted to go to Vancouver, and that whole debacle and stuff.
Yeah, only lasted like 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, they weren't there very long. They were there basically in the like mid to late 90s, and then they were gone before the early 2000s. Like they were out of there pretty much. Like they were there for like, to my knowledge at least, like I was born in 91, so there's dating me a little bit. And but they were their reign ended, or not the reign, but their time in Vancouver ended roughly around when Jordan's second stint with the Bulls finished. Like he did his kind of farewell tour. They were here for,
you mean when he came back
after, and they were gone. When
he came back and
yeah, they won their second three-peat, or did their second three-peat,
and blank blocked the Sonics the year that they were the best team in the NBA. And yeah, like
when the Sonics do come back, because I think they will, I'll probably start watching the games again. Like even for me in hockey, like again, being from Canada, I'm supposed to love hockey, not so much. I've fallen out of love with the Vancouver Canucks, and I followed the Kraken because I was like, hey, there's hockey in Seattle. I'm more of a Seattle sports fan than I've ever been. Like I'm not a Blue Jays fan. I love the Mariners, even though they drive me nuts. So yeah, I'm a full Seattle sports fan through and through.
Yeah, I thought I was really going to get into hockey when the Kraken came back, but I just, again, there's just so little time. And because I have to have a team, right? I'm not one of those fans. And I know there are a lot of them out there that can just be like, oh, I like the Red Wings. And then I like the Lakers. And then I'm a hometown guy. And so once we got the Kraken, I thought, oh, I'm going to get into this. I even thought about putting a deposit down for season tickets, and then just kind of selling them to make ends meet or whatever. But it was so hard because I wasn't familiar with the league as a whole. And so you have the expansion draft, all of a sudden you have 25 players on your roster, and I had never heard of any of them. So, now that they're rebuilding and they're going with young draft picks and stuff, maybe I'll get into it a little bit more. But at this point in my life, it's just like, and really all I have time for, but where the passion is, obviously NFL football, college football, those two kind of go hand in hand. And then I'm still a Mariner fan and a baseball fan, always will be, despite, obvious frustrations. Whatever, you gotta take the good with the bad. And as I always scold people with on Twitter, fan is short for fanatic. And so if you're just going to pick and choose which years you want to root for your team, are you really a fan?
Yeah, exactly. Well, like for me, for example, I was a season ticket holder of the Sea Dragons.
Oh, so was I.
Yeah, so I was going down to the Sea Dragons game all the time because it was football. It was at Lumen Field, and hey, I'm gonna get behind this. And honestly, I get it wasn't the greatest football, but it was still fun. Like I still enjoyed it.
I thought it was okay, and I thought it had a chance, and I still do. I just don't know if they've just never run a spring league properly, and they've never had the financial backing to stick with it long enough to get to where this is what I've always believed would be the key to the success of that league. And maybe they're on the verge of it now if they have enough financial backing. They're in, year 2 of the UFL, but it's basically a merger. So it's the 3rd year of the XFL and the USFL, right? But then they've merged. And there's talk now of expansion, maybe going back to 16 teams, and maybe Seattle will get the Dragons back again. But you have to make it work long enough and then figure out a way to get more recognizable quarterbacks. To me, and you're a quarterback guy, I know it. That's the key to the league. You can't have, oh my gosh, what is his name? Garcia. I can't remember his first name.
Steven Garcia.
Is it? He just keeps bouncing around to every single one of these leagues, and then he wins MVP or his team wins the champion. It's like he's 32 years old. He's not good enough to make it in the NFL. Like that's the face of your league as a quarterback. They have to start taking shots on. Take a guy that's failed in the NFL. Take a guy like Zach Wilson. That's just a name that pops into my head, right? And be like, look, I know you can make the veteran minimum, whatever. Are you really going to get a shot in the NFL? Come to us, and they'll need to invest in some of these guys. Maybe have a different salary structure for quarterbacks. I think that's what NFL Europe used to have. They could pay the quarterbacks more and get a guy like that in here, or Trey Lance, right? There's all these failed quarterbacks.
Yeah.
The Desmond Ritters and guys like that. Sam Howell could end up there and come play 12 games and get tape and then get invited back to a camp and maybe take your shot. If it hadn't been for NFL Europe, we never would have had Kurt Warner.
No, exactly. You wouldn't have had Kurt Warner. You wouldn't have had Jeff Garcia. You wouldn't have had a lot of guys because they couldn't get the extra reps. The thing for me, and it was interesting, I was having a discussion a few weeks ago with a friend of mine. He coaches down in Texas, and we were talking. And the thing that we both came to a realization is football is the weirdest sport globally compared to any other, compared to soccer, compared to hockey. Hockey, the rink's a bit bigger. Rules are relatively the same. Soccer, it's the same game. Basketball, even. But the minute you cross that 49th parallel, all of a sudden the field gets exponentially larger and you get less down. And the CFL itself has struggled greatly with fan engagement and getting, notoriety, like big time players like they used to have. Like there were quarterbacks up here. Warren Moon came up here. Doug Flutie came up here. Like it was a very much, and it is a very much quarterback driven league. And the thing me and him both said is, the CFL needs to adopt the mindset with this spring league, because the CFL, like up here, training camp starts in May. And we start playing in like May 19th, the first preseason game. And we're going basically all through the summer. And the thing I've always said is what they should do is they should take the spring league and the CFL and merge it into one. If you want to keep the field size, fine, but change to 4 downs. Get some sort of mesh with that. So that way the NFL, because you have 9 teams spread out across Canada, and then each team, so like for example the BC Lions end up being a farm team to the Seahawks and like the teams in the NFC West, and then so on and so forth. And that way these players that you have that aren't good enough, like we're saying, like a Trey Lance, he goes up to an established league. You can call it something a little bit different, but it's still an established, already kind of functioning league that has a history. Yeah. And you can get that to kind of drive the force and give these guys a second chance and give them the extra, hey, Trey Lance is up here from May till August, and then he goes back to whatever team he's with.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that allocation aspect of it is something that really worked for NFL Europe and was an appealing part of that. And I think that's how it would have to work, which is why I've always thought 16 was the right number for that league. And didn't they have merger talks a couple of years ago? Didn't
they? Did, and it fell apart. Like it got to the point with the CFL where we had American teams in the 90s.
Yeah, I remember that. But the allocation thing, I think, makes a lot of sense. Every team gets 8 to 10 players or whatever, and essentially what it would allow you to do, because teams sign guys to futures contracts in February anyway. So you do that, and then those guys can go get reps, but they still belong to you. And I think that's how you could get those quarterbacks. Jaron Hall would be a perfect example of a guy that is on the Seahawks roster, but he's not developing right now. Maybe he's doing the VR thing, right? But like he could be getting legitimate game reps in that league and then be done by training camp and come back to the Seahawks. It makes too much sense. The league has too much money to not make it happen. I don't understand why it doesn't.
And honestly, the league that I think's done the best job of building itself a farm system has been the NHL. Because you can call up players constantly, drop them back down. They're still playing high-level hockey. So, like, if you get a draft pick or, that 7th or 6th round guy that's a roster bubble that you don't want to try and squeeze onto your practice squad because, hey, we might lose him, but he still needs time to develop. Hey, instead of sending him to your practice squad, now you can send him to this. Yeah. That team's going to help develop his skill set. We protect him for 3 years of his contract. So year 4, he's free game. If we don't want him, then he can be poached by another team. Yeah. But that's something that I think would be an interesting way if you were going to do that.
Before we get to some of the questions and comments, what's the latest you're hearing about Taylor Elgesma? He came down to the Senior Bowl. He really had some moments, obviously showed off the big arm and he's got the big frame and everything. Wasn't invited to the combine. Haven't heard any draft buzz. It feels like he's going to be an undrafted guy. Is he someone that's going to be drafted high in the CFL and probably sign there? Or are you still hearing anything in regards to his NFL prospects?
So he did have a really good pro day at Buffalo. So he went to the University of Buffalo and did the pro day there. And again, he impressed a lot of scouts with his arm and his ability. Now, I think he's going to be one of those guys where he's either a 6th, 7th round guy. Maybe some team takes a flyer on him late in the 5th round. They have an extra pick. I don't think he's helped himself enough to get into that conversation. Part of it is, too, is he only started playing quarterback in grade 10. So you think of average guy that's played quarterback, they start in grade 8 or even younger than that. And they have some familiarity with it. He's a phenomenal athlete. But when it comes to even the CFL, the guy that's basically the top quarterback prospect in the CFL draft is Curtis Rourke. And it's not even a question, right? So Curtis Rourke is probably going to go somewhere in the NFL draft, but he's also going to be picked in the CFL draft, and some team's going to own his rights.
Yeah.
I think for Taylor, it's going to be, he may get picked late in the mid rounds of the CFL draft because there's only, I think, 6 rounds. I could be wrong. It's very minimal, the amount of picks they actually have. But I just think his biggest hiccup right now is trying to adjust to the American game from the Canadian game, which it can be easier and it can be more difficult depending on what scheme you're in. Like if you're in a Patrick Mahomes, Kansas City Chiefs air raid style offense, then that has a lot of similarities to what the CFL game has and the way they draw up concepts for the routes. But if you go to something like, say, Clint Kubiak in Seattle, if they were going to take a swing, much more timing based, much different than what he's used to in the Canadian game.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to some of this. John McGrath, always good to see you here. Agrees they're pretty much done in free agency, waiting on the draft. Are you okay with that? I mean, that's certainly what it feels like. Or is there something else out there that you'd like to see him just add another body to a certain position?
I'd like to see them add another linebacker, like off the ball linebacker, whether he's a special team guy. Just give yourself more depth than Josh Ross?
Josh Ross, yeah. I just want to say John Ross.
Yeah, and Drake Thomas. Like, we really only have 4 off the ball linebackers, and I would like to see them go get another veteran maybe in there. Like the offensive line thing, and I know it's going to be a huge topic of conversation, and everyone's so upset going into this. If you listen to a lot of the NFL, draft guys, like especially Daniel Jeremiah, the big thing that came back from them was this is a bad free agency class. You're not getting any really top end talent. And so when it comes to the offensive line, like I didn't want to see John Schneider like throw a huge chunk of money at a guy like a Tevin Jenkins if he's got injury issues or, whatever it may be, or a Lucas Patrick or whatever. Like I get he signed a minimum deal, but if they're not going to go and sign that guy instantly from the guys that just had him in New Orleans, it's a pretty strong indication that they weren't a fan of what he did. And you listen to John's show and from people I've talked about, like Dennison and Benton were really one of their first tasks when they got into the building was to evaluate Seattle's talent. Like, what do they have there? And is it even workable? Like, how much are we going to have to address things in the draft and free agency? And for their scheme, there are guys here they really, really like that they actually wish they could have drafted for their teams where they were before in New Orleans and didn't get the opportunity. So there's some guys here they really do like.
I actually, it's one of the things I really like about how they put that staff together. And even though when we were in the process, we were all frustrated by how long it was taking, clearly there was a process to it. And those kinds of conversations were being had. And you hear John talk about that pretty openly now that like, these guys, they didn't just snap up the first job that came along. They weren't desperate to get back in the league. They've been, Dennison and Benton specifically have been coaching in the league a long time. They're in their 60s now. They could probably walk away from the game and be pretty comfortable if they wanted to. The Seahawks had to sell the opportunity to them just as much as they had to sell themselves to the Seahawks. And that's one of the reasons that I really am encouraged by this group that they've put together. And that's one of the reasons. And that's a great angle when we start talking about free agents that are left, as I touched on already, but also when we get to the draft, right? Like everybody wants us to take, almost every mock draft I see from fans, they take at least 2 offensive linemen in the first 5 picks, which I think is a poor use of resources in the best part of the draft, right? There are other positions of need that need to be addressed. And if you don't address them in the top 100, the cliff falls off pretty quick. I'm thinking about corner in particular. I think this team needs a good young corner to add to the mix, and it has to happen in those first 5 picks. I think it applies to wide receiver as well. Whereas offensive line, there's dudes I like on day 3 all day long. And so, but also you have to ask yourself, like, okay, if I get to day 2 and, pick a player, even like I know everyone loves Tate Ratledge, right? He's kind of become the darling of Seahawks fan mock draft, the mock draft community. And maybe he's not the best example in the world because I do think he'd be a perfect fit. But do we know for sure that he's a better prospect or has a better ceiling than Christian Haynes or Jalen Sundell or even Saul Lamea or Anthony Bradford? Like, do we know that for sure? We're intrigued. We get enamored with the unknown and the new fresh prospect because we haven't seen him fail. Right.
And that's the thing. Like, I've done a few mock drafts lately, and the thing for me, when I look at this now and I look at what they've done in free agency and where they've allocated their money and how much money they have left, I think there's part of it, and John has alluded to it numerous times, is we're constantly watching what other teams are doing. I think there is a higher chance that the impact offensive lineman for this season is either on Seattle's roster in a Christian Haynes or a Lamea or that, or it's someone they trade for. I don't think it's going to be a free agent or a necessary drop pick, because I could see Seattle doing this. And this is what, like what you alluded to there, Dan, with people constantly taking 2 linemen in those top, 5 or out of the 5 picks we have in the first 100, 2 of them are offensive line always. And they're the higher point. Well, I could see Seattle sitting there, and if a guy like Michael Williams falls to them at 18, did they go defensive edge? Because edge, like I saw your show the other night, I couldn't agree more. Edge is a huge need for this team.
Especially now that we know Nuos is coming off a procedure. Yeah,
exactly. And Maffei's got, his contract coming up. Are you prepared to pay him what they just paid in Buffalo for their edge that's basically roughly produced somewhat similar results? Yeah. That's a steep number. And I think corner's another thing. I could see them going edge and corner with their first 2 picks and not even touching offensive line.
Dude, and I'm going to do a show on this next week, and I know people are going to freak, but I could see corner in the first round. I could
too. I could easily see them. Like,
if the right guys are. The more I watch Siobhan Ravel before the injury, like, to me, he screams Mike McDonald corner, and maybe they get a discount getting him at 18 or a little bit later because of the injury. But there's possibilities there for sure. I did think one thing that we'll do at the end here is I teased that we could do a little members only mock draft and we could get everybody's votes and get their input.
Yep, I'm good for that.
If we keep it to a 3-rounder, I was just before I hit live, I had this thought. We could do 2 of them kind of quickly, do one with an offensive lineman in the first round, one without, and just kind of see how the board falls after that and how much we like it. Because look, as much as I've been a proponent for this philosophy, that I think their process this offseason has been really good so far. They took their biggest shot and their best shot at the best player at that position that was available at guard. Once Trey Smith wasn't on the market anymore, right? Will Fries became the best guy available, especially for the system and the scheme that they're going to run. They offered him what would have been the biggest contract in Seahawks history for an offensive lineman. They wanted to be able to take a look at the leg. It was a serious injury, and there's been no indication. Remember when they signed Connor Williams last year coming off the ACL? Drew Rosenhaus is out there saying he's going to be ready for training camp. There is nothing coming from Fry's camp. They don't know when he's going to be ready yet. So it was completely reasonable that Seattle would come in and ask for a physical before they committed those kinds of dollars. So for Minnesota to just say, hey, you know what? Not only will we waive the physical requirement, but we're going to tack on 2 years and make it $88 million. Or was it 66? That to me is crazy. It's like Jackson Bevins mentioned on the show the other day. He's in real estate, and he said that'd be like buying a house and waiving inspection. Like, it's a major risk. Maybe
it is.
Maybe it pays off for him, maybe it doesn't. After he was off the board, there were no sure things left on the market at all. So I like the process a lot so far. But don't get me wrong. If they're sitting there at 18 and there's a game-changing dude there, I not only would I want them to take him, but I think they will. And I think John's kind of like hinting at that now. Like he said again on his show yesterday, he's like, this is a good class. We really like this class. Maybe that means they take a guy on day 2, but it also might mean if Grace is able sitting there at 18 and they think he's a game changer, they could still take him, So
100%. And
not so worried about that.
The thing that I'm going to be like, the thing with this, especially the interior side of this offensive line class, not so much the tackles, but if you really dig into the interior part of this class, there is a lot of depth. And when you look at NFL offensive lines and you look at where round 2 and round 1 guards are, there's not a whole lot of them. When you look at most guards that are good, they're mid to late round guys that develop into, like Steve Hutchinson that we had was an anomaly. And we saw that. Right. Same with Alan Faneca, like an anomaly that these 2 guys were drafted as high as they were at the time that they played, but it was a different era of football. I think you'll see guards start becoming more important with teams playing more too high and the run game starting to come back. And I think this running back class is going to change and kind of have that cyclical cycle where now we're going to see more teams go back to the run game.
Yeah.
But when you have a zone blocking scheme, and especially a wide zone scheme, it's more about 5 being 1. That's the term I got told by an O-line coach that I know that's coached at university level. And he always says, it's not about 5 individual guys. You could have a star-studded group and they can be 5 great 5-stars, but they can't play together, then you have nothing.
Yeah,
he goes,
like basketball. Yeah,
exactly. It's 5 is 1. That's your best offensive line. So it doesn't matter as long as these guys can play. And that's the thing for me when I look at like a Kandra or a Jackson Slater, guys that you can get later on, they might come in and be a better fit and fit into what they're doing than someone at the higher end where you miss out on another talent position. Like if for whatever reason, a guy like Tyler Warren falls to you, Tyler Warren could be a game changer in this offense and change a whole bunch of things for Seattle. But, it's going to be like the way I see it going down is if there's a situation where you're sitting there at 18 and Booker's there and Calvin Banks is there and say Shamar Stewart and Tyler Warren, you're picking one of them. One of them is a blue chip player. You have 4 blue chip level players. You're taking one of them.
Yeah. You take the player in the first round that you think has the best chance to be a star, regardless of position, even if you already have one, right? Like if, and this would be probably the best test of John Schneider's assertion that they go best player available in the first round, no matter what, right? Vontae Mack, no matter what. And then, as we get deeper into the draft, they go more for need. Now, I always say that with a little bit of an asterisk that they do incorporate need into their draft grade. But if they're at 18 and Ashton Genty for some reason falls through, what are the chances he's not number 1 on the board, right? Now, I still don't think they'd take him, but that might be the truest test. Before we move off offensive line, because I knew we'd get there at some point, I was really surprised yesterday by one thing from Schneider's radio show, because I think the guy that's gotten forgotten in that group that the Seahawks have drafted or signed, including Sundell over the last 2 years, is Anthony Bradford, because I just assumed he's not a scheme fit. He's a gap power guy, and he's a mauler, and he's strong as heck. Before he got hurt last year, especially in the preseason, man, there were all these reps where he was basically blocking guys with one arm and then looking for other work. Like, I really thought that it was going to be kind of a breakout year for him, but just had some questions about the movement skills. But John Schneider yesterday, sung Bradford's praises and was talking about how he can't wait to see him with the new staff and how much they like him, that he's a mauler, that he's physical and he buries guys, but he gets to the second level too. And I was like, wait a minute, maybe I need to go back and watch some more Anthony Bradford, because he might not be on the outs. Well,
and you look at John Benton's career and who they've had at guard, they usually have big, physically mauling guards. That's what they have. And the other thing I think people have to kind of break away from is what Ryan Grubb did last year. Ryan Grubb was a very drop-back oriented pass game. There wasn't play action. There wasn't a lot of pocket movement. There wasn't a lot of slide protections. It was all, hey, we're dropping straight back. Geno, stay in the pocket. Well, for bigger guards, that's a problem. It makes it two-way goes, essentially, is what you get interior, where that D tackle can go either the A gap or the B gap, and they can run more stunts, and they can do more things. But if you watch what Clint Kubiak in this offense does, even what McVay does, and even what Shanahan does, the pocket's never in the same spot every single pass play. It's constantly moving, which now, as your O-line, you guys get to dictate where the lanes for the rush can kind of come from. And your quarterback also is a constant moving target. He's never sat in the same spot. They will do straight dropbacks, but it's not to the high level that we saw last year in Seattle. And that works when you do it in the college game, because you have a bigger field and the hashes make a big difference in that. But when you're doing it in the NFL game where the hashes are condensed, moving that pocket for a guy like an Anthony Bradford actually can help him.
Yeah. Yeah. John McGrath asks, what's your take on the Seahawks 30 visits lined up so far? Savion Williams is really interesting to me. Yeah. It's funny, because I was just watching tape on him a couple of days ago. In fact, I screen captured a couple of plays and I put him out on Twitter, because he did just a couple of fantastic catches. And then the next day it was announced that he's coming in for a visit. He's he's a fun player in that he's extremely raw as a receiver. Like, my goodness, the route running needs a lot of work. He kind of reminds me, unfortunately, and part of it's just his build. Like, they're built the same. They got the dreads and everything, same helmet from TCU. He reminds me of Quentin Johnson. Came out or was it Williams? No, Johnson.
Yeah.
Who just cannot catch the football. I think Savion Williams has better hands than Johnston did, but he was almost used even at that body type, like 6'4", kind of long and lean, used as much as a runner as he was as a receiver. Had 6 touchdowns receiving, had 6 touchdowns on the ground. And so it makes you wonder, like, and a lot of people, what was the comp that people were trying to give me the other day?
Sidney Rice.
Sidney Rice was one, and then Quentin Johnson was the other one. But I countered with Cordarrelle Patterson, like a guy that, came into the league, didn't really stick as a receiver, and then basically transitioned to running back. So he's got that dual skill set. Maybe this is, they kind of see him as potentially what Shaheed was doing for Kubiak before he got hurt in New Orleans.
Yeah, I could see that. He, to me, again, this is where it's going to be really interesting. This is where I've done more deep diving myself into not so much Clint Kubiak, but I've really gone and dived back into Gary and Mike Shanahan's time in Denver together, when Gary was the OC to Mike, when he had Elway. But the key thing I was looking at is when they had Shannon Sharpe, Rod Smith, and Ed McCaffrey. Ed McCaffrey and Rod Smith were very similar receivers. Their skill sets were almost identical in what they could do. And so when we brought in Kupp, and everyone's going, oh, him and JSN are the same player. If you really look at the offense and the way that they use it, they want guys that have similar skill sets. They're not necessarily looking to have a variety of receivers. They want guys that they can plug in, and it's not going to change the architecture of the offense. So, like, they've got MVS, and there's your speed guy.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, I've heard people talk about, oh, well, Besh is, too much like Cooper Kupp or JSN, and he's not. Well, that's great, because then if Kupp moves out and I put Besh in, I'm not losing my skill set. I have a very identical skill set. So I think you may see this receiver room change drastically and get guys that are, and that's why I think Bobo might actually have more of a play in this offense than he has in his entire career in the NFL, because a lot of his strengths are the same as a Cooper Kupp and a JSN. It's those intermediate routes. It's the timing stuff. It's getting in and out of your breaks. Yes, Jake Bobo is not taking the top off of a defense. Yeah. But the one thing we've all said about Jake Bobo is, how does this guy keep getting open and getting separation from guys? Because he runs really good routes. Look for the receivers that run the best routes in this draft to be guys that Seattle will be interested in and potentially draft.
Yeah, and if they took a guy like Savion Williams, presumably he looks like he's going to fit into that day 2 group, then I would think maybe they come back later on day 3 and kind of double down on someone else who's a little bit more of a kind of an X, like an outside, maybe a little more polished route runner. He didn't do all the testing at the combine, but here's what we do know: 6'4", 222, 32.5-inch arms. Ran a 4.48. It's good, not great, but good enough. And a 1.5, 210-yard split. He didn't do any of the other explosive testing. I don't know when TSU's pro day is right off the bat, but you turn on the tape and it's the acrobatic catches. It's the contested catches. That's one thing that we kept wanting to see from DK Metcalf that just really wasn't a strength of his, was going up and getting those 50-50 balls, right? But you see him from Savion Williams on his tape, and then the yards after the catch stuff, like turning into a runner, even at his size after the catch, is pretty cool. Got to admit, he's a fun
He's a very fun guy.
Lot of buzz. You touched on Tyler Warren earlier. A lot of buzz about this, and my good buddy Clinton Bonner did an episode on the Seahawkers podcast, solo effort from Clinton. So really appreciate that. That was cool. Where he talked about studs that might still be available at 18, and that if Warren somehow slipped to 18, and he made a good argument for, like, if people start to panic about the quarterbacks, or we get a little bit of a run on offensive tackles, or maybe running back. You never know what's going to happen with quarterbacks, running backs. maybe the wide receiver run even starts before 18 a little bit on the few guys that are kind of graded as first round picks. You never know what's going to happen, right? And but then the flip side of that is this a guy that might be so impactful? Like the George Kittle comps are real. He's a really good blocker, but he's outstanding and dynamic as a pass catcher, and he has that wildcat quarterback experience, right? So maybe they could do some Taysom Hill kind of stuff with him, that maybe if he gets to 14 and the Colts are going to go a different direction, maybe you call, maybe, or maybe you're worried about the Colts taking him because everyone seems to think that they would, maybe jumping up ahead of him, giving up one of those extra picks to go get a guy like that. Would you be in favor of something like that for a player that most agree is one of the few blue chippers in this class?
If if you're going to make that move, then you are basically, in my opinion, saying Tyler Warren is coming in and he is going to be a focal point of our offense.
Oh, I think he would.
And I think that would literally be the thing, is Clint Kubiak sitting there going, I need this player. We need to move up and get him. Like, if I don't have him in this offense, it's going to struggle and we're going to be searching for that role. Then yes, you move up and get him. Otherwise, if tight ends are going to be a part of it, yes. But if you can get away with like a Mason Taylor type or someone else to complement an AJ Barner, because we still have Barner here, then I think you're in a different situation and you go get that blue chipper on defense. Like, the one thing the Eagles have done so well besides build an offensive line is add to strength. And the thing I think people have to look at is, yes, our defensive front seven looks really good right now on paper. Leonard Williams is not getting any younger. Yes, he had a good year, but he's not getting any younger. D-Law, who we brought in, is not a young player.
Sure.
Chenna's not a young player. Like, he is, but his injuries have definitely changed his career arc, I think, in some respects. He could come back and have a fantastic season, and then you're down to Boy Mafe in a contract year, and then Derek Hall. Like, Byron Murphy's really the only one. Jaron Reed, I even forgot, but Byron Murphy's really the only one that you have a certainty of the next 3 years or 5 if you take his option. Add to your strength. If there is an edge there and it's between Tyler Warren and a Shamar Stewart or a Michael Williams or a Mike Green or one of these guys that you believe can come in and be an impact guy in your defense, keep hammering away, because this offense is not built to do shootout football like it was last year. That's the complementary factor of Clint Kubiak. They are going to tire out the other team's defense by long, sustained drives and allow our defense to be on the sideline getting fresh and come out and attack their offense and stifle it. That's the point of the complementary football I think Mike McDonald is after. Not, hey, we're going to go up and put 40 points and throw it all over the yard. No, we want to sustain drives. We want a 5-7 minute drive, grind out that quarter, make that defense gas. We'll put their offense out there that's been sitting on the bench for 5 minutes, and then we'll just go and attack it and wreak havoc with our defensive weapons.
X-Wing says, I want Warren and Grant. I mean, you'd probably, because look, I think Kenneth Grant is one player that all the mock draft simulators have it wrong. He is not getting out of the first round. He is not. He's a first round player. I think he's going to be taken in the 20s at the lowest. If you want Kenneth Grant and Tyler Warren, you're going to have to trade probably next year's one to get up and get both those guys. But yeah, I like both those players. So don't get me wrong. Hey, Thomas, thanks for the super thanks. If you can pick between Golden, Burden, or Tet McMillan for Seattle, who would you be happy with if selected? Ooh, this is a good question.
I'm gonna let you go first on this one, Dan.
I'll preface it by saying, as I touched on earlier, like, I'm just now, and this weekend is kind of set aside for that. Like, I hadn't dug into receivers really and watched a bunch of tape because it was a need, and I was going to take one out of this class at some point, but I wasn't anticipating having to look for someone to fill the shoes of DK Metcalf, right? So here's what I'll say so far, right, is I don't think Burden's a fit. Not in the first round, certainly. No. And he's probably not there at 50. So he kind of falls in that in between because he is a slot only guy. And we've got two of those already. Not necessarily. I mean, I'm exaggerating a little bit. Like JSN, we know can play some outside, and I think he's going to play more of it this year, certainly. But he's just a guy that he's not an accomplished route runner. He's just not. He's not polished at all. And so if you're going to take a guy like that, I'd rather take Savion Williams. So I think he has more upside and he's more versatile. He can help you in other ways and he can play outside. Golden is an accomplished route runner, but everything that I hear from other analysts is that 4.29 doesn't show up on tape. I mean, that's not really his game, but he's a guy that's very, very precise in his route running, and he is sudden, and I think he might be the best receiver in this class. Ted McMillan, I haven't made my mind up on yet. Like, it is just as easy to find the great reps that has everybody salivating because he's got the big catch radius and he's 6'5" and he goes up and gets the ball. And surprisingly for his frame, the yards after the catch, the run after the catch stuff's pretty cool. But you can just as easily find reps where it looks like he's dogging it off the line of scrimmage. If the ball's not coming to him, he's not a good decoy. Some of the route running's a little lazy. And I'm like, weren't we kind of frustrated with our last number one receiver because of some of those things? And so I'm not 100. I'm going to have to take a pass on this question. I don't know. Of the three, I'd say right now, Golden would be the guy that I would want. I guess I don't want to back out of that question.
So my preface on this is, who's the best blocker?
No, that's a good question. And
that's the thing I've changed. I've really changed in how I've evaluated this receiver group going. Because the thing is, and this is the thing with this offense now, is you're not going to see true slot play anymore. You're not going to see 11 personnel and a true slot guy a lot of the time. You'll see the tight end flexed out there.
Yeah.
You'll see more reduced splits. That's what you will see more of in this offense. So you're not going to get the really true slot plays like the bubbles and stuff. You won't see as much as that anymore. So for me, it's who blocks the best and who's the guy that runs the best intermediate routes and creates the most natural separation with their route running, not with their speed. And out of that group, it's tough. Like, I'd say it's between McMillan and Golden. I don't think Burton's a fit, and I don't like his blocking. He's not nearly a great enough blocker. Ted McMillan is probably the best blocker out of that group, and that would, for me, give me the edge in that, and I'd probably lean to him. And I get Golden's a phenomenal receiver.
Yeah.
But I don't see the same blocking. He wasn't asked to do that at Texas.
Yeah, and what is he, 5'10"?
He's 5'10", but you look at Cooper Kupp, he's 6'2",
sure,
200 pounds. That's more there. And then again, you go back and look at how this offense has been built. Puka Nacua is not a freaky big guy, but he's big enough. And you look at some of these other guys, like, that's kind of where they go with it. They go with guys like, even I'll look at the Vikings, for example. Look at
5'11", and 191 for Golden.
Yeah, so look at Addison, who's with the Vikings. He's not really a slot guy. He plays outside. That was what he was building coming into the NFL was, hey, he's going to be a slot magician. He's never really developed into that. He's just an all-around receiver in that offense. And you look at Ayuk and you look at Debo and Juwan Jennings, and those guys were in San Francisco for so long together. And that's just kind of that's what I really like about this offense that they're going to, is you don't get niche players. The players, and Cooper Kupp alluded it to in his press conference, you need to know everything. You can't just be a one-dimensional, I'm an X or I'm a Z or I'm an F slot. Like, no, you're in everything. And if you don't know everything, you're not going to play that much. Great question, though, from Thomas.
Yeah, it was. I'll tell you what, I feel so much better, and I already felt great about the Cooper Kupp signing. Like, how could you not? I still, I was talking to somebody on the show the other day about how he's the first free agent I think we've signed in quite a while where, as a fan, you just kind of stop yourself and go, I can't believe we got that guy. Like, I can't believe he's a Seahawk now. Like, it's so cool. But then to hear him talk about how good he's feeling physically and how excited he is for this offense and how he fits into it with Jackson. And then to hear Snyder yesterday say he passed all of their medical testing and physical stuff with flying colors. They have absolutely no concerns. And they're a team that's as risk averse when it comes to injury history as any team in the league. That's why they let Tevin Jenkins leave the building. Right. So, I'm really, really excited about that. Scott asks, thanks for the super thanks. Scott, if you're going to draft another off-ball linebacker, what round would be the sweet spot? Well, this one I have to qualify because there's a couple of guys in the first round that I think make sense. And I've been trying to make the argument for this and even had some more discussion on it today. Jahad Campbell, Jalen Walker, I think are going to be in the mix at 18 not because they're not confident that Ernest Jones' knee is going to hold up or that Tyrese Knight needs to be replaced. But when you look at what Mike McDonald did in Baltimore, when he had Roquan Smith, Patrick Queen, and Malik Harrison, who he played. It was an off-ball linebacker / kind of hybrid edge. He wasn't perfectly built for either of those things, but he could play both. And McDonald mixed and matched and used all of them together at times. And that's where I think Walker and Campbell cannot be dismissed in the first round, because those guys can be just as dynamic lining up off the edge, but they also, because of their off-ball linebacker experience, they know how to stack and shed, and they know how to cover. So I think both those guys can be in play there. If you don't do that, then I'm waiting till day 3. There's guys on day 2 I like, but it's not a great class. And so after that, I'm just hoping they find a guy in the 3rd round, or on day 3, that McDonald just thinks is a fit. Ideally, a weak side guy that can cover, and just go sideline to sideline, and just a guy that's a scheme fit. And there's a bunch of those guys on day 3. Like, I'm a Jack Kaiser fan. I like Smile Mondon from Clemson, Georgia.
Somewhere down in the SEC, Dan. You're going to throw a dart, you'll hit somewhere that produced the linebacker.
I should have said Georgia, because everyone is from Georgia in this draft. And so, you have a pretty good shot at. So yeah, that might be a little bit of a cop-out answer. Where I get really uncomfortable is if they take a guy on day 2, like a Demetrius Knight. Although, again, I guess I know I'm hedging here, but any draft decision they make on defense, even if it seems weird in the moment, and I hope I remember this when I'm live streaming during the draft, right? I'm just going to defer to Mike McDonald, and that he knows what he wants, exactly what he wants in a player. We saw him do it with the inside linebackers during the season, right? And just be like, nope, that's not working. Reset. So anything they do, if they take a guy in at any point in the draft where I'm like, really? There? Okay, I get it. That's how I'm going to feel.
The linebacker sweet spot one's a good question. I think, again, there's guys on the top, especially for off ball, but they're more Swiss Army knife off-ball linebackers, like a Jihad Campbell, a Walker. Like, they're guys that you can do more than just play them off-ball. When I think of an off-ball linebacker, like Ernest Jones, for example, is a phenomenal off-ball linebacker. He's not rushing you off the edge. He's not an edge, gadget guy that way. I think your best sweet spot is probably mid to late round 3 and through round 5 is probably your sweet spot where you're going to get a good player that can come in and contribute on special teams, but then at the same time, if a Knight goes down or if a Jones goes down for a couple games, you can plug him in, and it is going to be an upgrade over a Drake Thomas or a Josh Rose.
Yeah. I also think when it comes to off-ball linebacker that, if they do draft a guy, and they probably will, that it could be someone I've never heard of or studied. It could be a smaller school guy, or a guy that just doesn't have a lot of buzz, or maybe didn't go to the Senior Bowl, although that's usually the way that they lean. I just think, McDonald knows exactly what he's looking for, what he likes. And if he sees him on tape, he's going to pound the table for it, even if it's a guy that maybe we're not familiar with.
Danny Studsman is someone that I really like.
Yeah, he tested so much better
than what he thought. Exactly.
Because he's like a 6'2", 235-pound white off-ball linebacker. And I was like, he's slow. He's got to be slow, right? But his testing really opened my eyes. I that's a guy. And then there's another one similar to him.
Carson Swessinger?
No, he's a little smaller, actually, than I'd hoped he would.
Yeah.
Is it Cody Lindenberg out of Minnesota?
Oh, yeah, there you go. That's another name that I was looking for. Yeah,
really, really liked him at the Senior Bowl, and he was the same thing where you see him, and he's kind of tall and lean, and you think, oh, he's probably not very sudden and quick, but he tested better than I expected, and I really liked his work in Mobile in the pass rush stuff. Yeah, Cody Lindenberg, 6'3", 240, 4'6", 240. So he's a guy that will be available on day 3. Another guy that's getting a lot of buzz too is Nick Martin at Oklahoma State, a little bit on the smaller side, but a guy that really hits and he can really run. But he was banged up a lot last year, so he's kind of flown under the radar. But I've had people tell me they think he would be a really good fit. So there's some guys. There's some guys.
Oh yeah, there's guys. You just gotta be willing to wait, and you gotta be willing to take them when they present themselves.
Another super chat, Dominic. Thank you for the donation. Idea: Riq Woolen and 2 picks for a late first in 22, between 22 and 32. Okay, let's open the discussion about Riq Woolen. However, I'll say this: nobody is trading next year's firsts. It's just not going to happen. It
Not
is
in that class, not a chance.
widely considered to be a better overall class at the top through a number of positions, but particularly at the quarterback position, it's expected to be much better. And so there's a reason we're in a very historical period right now where, as we sit today, what exactly 1 month away from the beginning of the draft, every single first round pick, as we sit here in this moment, is still owned by the team that it belonged to originally. Nobody has traded their first round pick. It's the latest we've ever gotten, the closest we've ever gotten to the draft without anyone trading their first round pick. And there's a reason for that, because nobody wants to give up what it takes to acquire that pick because it's not as strong in the top. And so knowing next year is supposed to be much better, nobody's going to give up that capital. Now, I will say this, and I've been pretty consistent on this. If the Seahawks take a corner on day 2, I think they will, and it's someone that looks like, if it's an Azariah Thomas or a Trey Amos or a Malik Harrison, a guy that you might think can start as a rookie and be more of a Mike McDonald type corner, guy that can come up and hit, play zone and man, then look for them to shop Riq on day 3 when the cornerback class falls off a cliff, and really all you have left on day 3 are a bunch of small slot guys.
That's exactly how I feel about this.
You might be able to get something, and then that might include a future pick. It's just not going to be at first.
I think the whole thing is going to depend on exactly that, Dan. If they fall in love with a corner, or a couple of them that they know are going to be day 1 guys, and end up there in those 5 picks of top 100, especially the top half of that, and they take that guy, they're not paying Riq $90 million. They're just not. The fact that the dude in his first year with the new head coach, I'll put it this way. Obviously, I know you've talked about the podcast with DK Metcalf. Everyone has, with him being on with Marshawn and Mike Robb. And one thing stood out to me in that more than the Grubb thing. Well, there was 2 things, but Grubb thing didn't really stand out. I already knew that there were issues there. It was when he said he felt like an outsider. Yeah. Riq Woolen does not fit the mantra of Mike McDonald. He just doesn't. He's not that type of guy. I don't think, like, when you look at Devin Witherspoon and the way that Mike McDonald talks about Devin Witherspoon, and even when we were all sitting here going like, where's Devin last year? Like, he wasn't making all the plays. All you could hear from Mike McDonald was, man, this guy's our guy. He's he's one of our main guys on defense. He's a baller. He's this, he's that. He's just a dude. Even when Riq had a good game, you didn't really hear that. It was like, yeah, Riq played well. Or, yeah, Riq, then if Riq did something awful or was bad, like, you'd hear Mike say, like, yeah, he's got to be better. He's got to be more consistent. He's got to dial in and be checked in. Type of energy, right? Like, I need Pete to be the guy that's going to he's going to put the arm around me. He's going to love me even through the bad or whatever. That seems to be the kind of thing that Riq responds to. I don't think he responds to the Mike McDonald type of coaching and the way this organization's now going. You're seeing an organizational shift from even how John Snyder talks all the way down. And I've messaged people I know that are connected and said the same thing. Like, they are very much turning into a Baltimore Ravens, Michigan Chargers type of Harbaugh mentality. And that's where I think you feel players like a DK in that need that reassurance and need those type of things that Pete gave, not feeling as comfortable in the building as they once did, where other guys like Pete only got 1 season with JSN and Devin. They seem to fit in fine to what Mike McDonald's doing.
What do we always hear from John and now Mike McDonald? Because he echoes these philosophies: smart, tough, dependable, and all ball, right? Is Riq Woolen smart, tough, and dependable, right? Like, he got benched for the beginning of a game last year because he was out partying the night before. Yep. The run defense has been inconsistent. Now, we know that when they first arrived in Seattle, the staff loved Riq. We heard Leslie Frazier go on with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks on their podcast, talk about how they thought he had the potential to be a guy that traveled with number 1 receivers. Like, they had that sort of impression of him before they even took over. So if it could go either way. If we get through the draft and Riq's part of the team and he's a starter on opening day, then it obviously means that they believe he can be that guy. If not, like I said earlier, corner could be in play in the first round. And there's one guy in particular. Well, there's two. Jahdae Barron, I think, might be the best defensive back in the entire class. Now,
he is a draft crush of mine.
And he's Mike Macdonald all the way through. Like he can man up, and he has great coverage skills, and he blew the doors off the combine and everything else. Like the tape matches the testing, but he likes to hit too. He really likes to hit. And he's a guy that he's a little bit more stout than Witherspoon. And I could see a scenario where if he's sitting there at 18, they take him, and that's what allows you to play Witherspoon on the outside full time. I've talked about this ever since I heard Witherspoon on Gruden's podcast about a month ago, actually, talk about how when he's in there in the slot, he has to take on guards on just about every play. I don't want that long term. I don't want that for Devin Witherspoon. He's just not built for it. So a guy like Barron would make sense in that context. And then a guy like Siobhan Revell, who, if he doesn't blow his ACL, week 3 or 4, or was it preseason? Which is good news because it means he'll be ready, right? He was a guy that's probably going to be in line to be the first cornerback taken in the draft, and probably was going to be in that top 10 to 15 range, where because of the injury, sort of a Jeffrey Simmons kind of opportunity that the Seahawks had once and passed on, where if it looks good to go with his knee and he's going to be ready to go, like he's 6'3", 193, 4.4 40, has all the athletic skill. You can just as easily find great man reps as you can zone reps with him. Like his instincts are off the charts, but he's also big and long. Like if the Seahawks don't take him in the first round, he slips in the second round, he's a Raider.
Yeah.
Like he's a Pete Carroll corner all day long. Like I could see them going with a guy like that if they feel like the value's there in the first round. And if that happens, then I think the speculation grows even more because maybe they start shopping Riq overnight heading into day 2. So
there's a couple other names. Darian Porter's another guy that I think screams Seahawk, but I don't know if he'll be there.
And the physical stuff with the profile with Porter is I just don't think he's there yet. I think there's some development to be had there. Like he's
100%.
Very, very similar to Riq. He was a wide receiver his first 2 years and then converted to corner, and there's still some more to be done.
He's a little bit more aggressive, which I like. Denzel Burke out of Ohio State is another guy that I really like. He's more of a day 2 guy. And then Evil and Maxwell Hairston out of Kentucky.
Yeah.
6'1", 185. He can play inside. He can play out. But he's a guy, again, that's going to give you a little bit. Like, that's the thing, again, we have to remember with this defense. Pete Carroll's was you're a slot guy, and you're an outside corner, and you're a box safety. And then he tried to change it. Didn't really work. Mike Macdonald is much more, you have to play everywhere. You have to be comfortable outside. You have to be comfortable inside. Like, you look at, here's a good question. I'll ask this to the listeners too. Who is our free and who is our strong safety this year between Julian and Kobe Bryant? It didn't really matter. One of them at some point was the deep guy and the other guy was in the box and vice versa. Like, that's the versatility this defense now brings. So that's where, when we look at these players, we got to look at the versatility level. Are they strictly an outside corner? Well, then maybe they may not fit in Mike Macdonald's defense, because it feels like more with Riq Woolen, they tried to make a spot for him in this defense than this defense is made to have a true traveling number 1 shutdown corner.
Before we get to Thomas's question here, I'm going to read you some lines from a scouting report about a corner that I think he's probably more of an A2 guy. Todd McShay had said after the Senior Bowl that he thought he was getting into the first round conversation, but he just didn't. He doesn't have the elite testing numbers that I think would precipitate that. So he's probably a day 2 guy, but if he's there at 50 or 52, I think would be in play. I'm going to read you this and then see if you can guess who this is. Put on the tape, and you'll see why he has scouts intrigued. He's got some serious juice in that 6'2" frame, shows up ready for a fight in press coverage, throwing hands like a boxer and running stride for stride with receivers down the field. You've got to love the way he carries himself between the lines, plays with that dog mentality you want in your boundary corner. And then let's see, flip on the Duke tape, watch him whiff. Oh, wait, never mind. They talk about some weaknesses. I just want to focus on the positive. Let me see. Give him 2 years with a patient DB coach who can clean up his footwork and teach him to trust his eyes. You might have yourself a legitimate star on the boundary. That's Azariah Thomas. Like,
Yeah.
I think he's a guy that's going to grade out pretty favorably to the Seahawks.
I 100% agree with you. I think he's definitely one. The other corner, the one corner I think that is going to really tip this draft, and it's going to be not Travis Hunter. It's not going to be even Ravel. It's going to be, where is Benjamin Morris going?
Yeah, Benjamin Morrison, Notre Dame, 6 foot, 190. Is he's the one with he's had 2 hip procedures, right?
Right. He's the one that because like when he's on,
that's bothersome.
He is phenomenal. Like, he is great. Yeah. When he's off the field, obviously and injured, it's a problem. And that's why for me, he really is kind of where does he fall? Because then an Azariah Thomas and those guys will start to follow. Because let's be honest, like in my opinion, Will Johnson is the best corner in this draft class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's coming off an injury too. I think he's ready to do his pro.
He is the best corner. Travis Hunter is the best athlete in this class.
So here's a line from Benjamin Morrison's scouting report that I hadn't seen before. Morrison shows striking similarities to Marlon Humphrey in his early Baltimore years, a corner who can play bigger than his size through technique and competitive toughness.
Yep. Now, if his health checks out, there's a guy.
Right. Okay. Thomas says, other than Warren, who would you be okay with Seattle trading up for? I'll let you give you my answer, your answer first, because mine's kind of a cop out, but strategically so.
Trading up for. Okay, so for me, because I don't think he's going to be there at 18, I just don't see it. I would be okay if Seattle traded up for Mykel Williams. I get his pro day, his testing, all that didn't look that good. When you throw the tape onto this guy, if he had came out last year, he would have been a top 10 pick and it wouldn't have even been close. Like, he is, to me, he is such a Swiss Army knife that you can use on that defensive front. He can play inside, he can play outside, but he just wrecks games. Like, he wrecks games. So he'd be a guy, because I think he's going to go in the top 12. I think some team's going to like him and take him. He'd be the guy like I'd trade up for. Like, Warren's great and everything, and I think he's a phenomenal tight end. I'm even leaning more to, I like, what he does. I just wonder at some point is like, are you going to get enough use out of him the way you want to use him? Like, you have to change your entire offense to funnel through that guy more than, hey, we are adding him to complement things.
Well, and this gets into like resource value too. Like, I wonder when we get to draft day if we might see Warren fall and be picked later than some are expecting, simply because this is considered a very, very good tight end draft. And so if you're sitting there, if you are the Colts at 14 and you're thinking, man, we really like Tyler Warren, we think he's going to be a blue chip player, but the Colts aren't a tight end away, certainly, from being good. They have so many other needs, especially on the defensive side of the ball, and even in rebuilding that offensive line that needs to happen now, that, I think I'd be more inclined, if I was a GM, to take a foundational guy at one of those positions and then, try and come back around in the next round and get a Terrence Ferguson or a Mason Taylor, a guy like that. So you have to weigh that, right? So my answer to this was simply going to be, if the Seahawks trade up at any point, like they're 12, 13 on the board or whatever, and it's like, oh, we have a trade, and we see the Seahawks, wait, where's the thing? And we hear this, right? And we see the Seahawks coming up. We're like, oh, then whoever it is, it's a player they have conviction for and they have a plan for and that they believe makes them better. And so whoever it is, I'm okay with. Like, because it's such a rarity for John Schneider to do that. I don't think we've ever seen him do it in the first round, have we? He's traded up. We saw him trade up to get DK Metcalf. He's traded up and down the board all over the place after day one, but has he ever traded up?
I don't believe so, no.
I don't think he has either. So if they ever do, it's got to be for someone that they really, really have conviction about, and that's all I'm ever looking for. Like, if it's a player I don't like, tell me why you do, and I'm going to trust you because you're the pros, right? You're the ones doing it. What do I know? I'm just a film junkie and a fan, right? So that's my answer to that. Like it or not.
No, and I think that's a fair answer. I'll say this before we do our mock draft. Something for me that has changed drastically in the last 2 weeks. I don't think quarterback is such a priority anymore for Seattle.
Yeah, I don't either. There was a minute there. Well, when immediately upon them signing Sam Darnold, I thought, okay, they're going to pair this with another young guy to develop behind him, kind of as a hedge, right? Yeah, I don't think so. I think they're going to let the board fall to him if they
find somebody. Yes,
yeah.
I know they brought Tyler Shuck in for
visit with him.
Yeah, I'm
like, again, if that falls into my last answer, if they take a guy at 18, then okay, that means they think that he has a chance to be a franchise quarterback, and they're okay him not playing for a while. But yeah. I don't think that's going to happen. I think things would have to go in a very strange way. I still do think they'll take one at some point, but it's looking more and more to me like it's going to be day 3. I really think that they believe, I know the contract was structured in such a way that they can get out of it if they want to, but I think they all also believe, and they signed Sam Darnold with the hope that he would take another step and be a franchise quarterback and be their 10-year guy. That's option one. That's option one.
It is. I think if they do take somebody, it'll be to compete with Sam Howell.
Yeah.
That's who they're taking. They're taking anybody. It's to come in and compete with Sam Howell and hedge against the Darnold falling apart. This is the thing that has driven me nuts a little bit about Seahawks, social media, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, over the last couple of weeks with, and Daniel Jeremiah actually had a clip, and it really struck home to me, was when I think it was Greg Rosenthal he was talking to on his show.
Oh yeah, they have a new.
Yeah, and Rosenthal was a huge Geno guy, and he's come out and said this is a bad move by Seattle, blah, blah, blah. And Daniel Jeremiah basically said to him, he goes like, why? Sam is 7 years younger, Geno in 2022, went through a bad stint with the Jets, gone off, has kind of figured out, now has his time to shine. And the first time he gets put in with a good a good organization and a proper offensive system, he plays well. So why can't that be just what Sam's going to do?
Yeah.
And that's the thing for me that, you get all these people and don't get me wrong, I love what Geno did in Seattle. But why, when you look at the allocation of money and how this organization has pivoted, are you all upset that they, you talk about the offensive line, and I get that, and it's going to be something that's always going to be a constant thing until it's fixed. But you would have had to have potentially, when Geno's deal does get announced, $75 million locked up in Geno and DK. Where are you getting the money for JSN and Charles Cross and Devin Witherspoon? You're going to lock up $60 potential million in 2 receivers. That's not the direction to build a team, because the Eagles are the anomaly of teams that made the Super Bowl in the last 5 years that have had a superstar receiving core.
Yeah.
Yes, Thomas, Denzel Burke.
Here's another one from John McGrath. I think they take best player available in this draft and go all in on Aller next year. He's a guy that that you've been high on for a while. Yep. I know Michael Thompson's been on Aller for 2 years now. He's just kind of being held back by that offense, sort of a Justin Herbert situation there potentially. And I know Rob Staten has so eloquently made the point a few times that he thinks Aller has John Schneider traits, like that he can really see Schneider, really loving what he sees in Aller. Let's see. We had one of these I like these kinds of questions. These are fun. Dominic Scott asks, and he likes to ask these questions too. Kenneth Grant, Jihad Campbell, Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College, Jalen Walker, and Derek Harmon on the D line. So we're presuming at 18 here, of those guys, who would you take?
I look at in this, I take Grant and Ezeraku, but I'd probably lean more in Grant, I think.
Same way. Grant's been my favorite pick at 18 all the way through.
I would love to see Grant and Byron Murphy lined up both in the A gap with D-Law and Leonard Williams. Like that on a 3rd and long, that would be fantastic to see, with maybe like a Hall or somebody adding to that rush. Like to me, you get Kenneth Grant, it frees up in some respects, Byron Murphy from having to be your nose tackle.
Yeah, and the thing I like, Grant, is, as much of a physical he is, and as many like just devastating, like dominating reps that you see on tape. Like this guy gives his body up. He doesn't care. He just throws himself at blockers sometimes. And he's such a physical freak. In fact, literally, he's been on Bruce Feldman's freak list the last 2 years. He's still really young. I think he's just 21 years old and really raw, which means that his best football is still ahead of him. Like his ceiling is higher than Byron Murphy's. I believe that. This was his pro day today at, let's see. First of all, go back. Hang on a second. I want to put this, give people the full picture here. Kenneth Grant is 6'3", 339 pounds. And this was his pro day today. 5'1" in the 40, 31-inch vertical, 27 reps on the bench. Doesn't show his like short shuttle and stuff like that. He didn't do all the tests. He was really disappointed because he was expecting to do he wanted to dominate the combine, and then a little hamstring tweak came up in his medical testing. But he's my favorite. Ezeraku is another one. I know this is a guy that Rob had in his first round a couple of weeks ago, and for good reason, even though he's a little shorter than you like out of an edge, makes up for it with like crazy go-go gadget, like long arms and burst and explosion and dip. And I think the word bend gets, overused a little bit, but like he offers something that the current group of edge guys in Seattle doesn't, that kind of just explosive element off the edge that, if you guys aren't familiar with Donovan Ezeraku, get familiar because he could be in play at 18. Derek Harmon is a guy I can't figure out yet. I don't know if I like him or not. Like I get it. He looks the part in some ways, but it's pretty easy to watch an Oregon game and not
notice him.
Yeah. And
he just kind of blends in. Yeah. He to me reminds me very much. Remember Kevin Williams and Tony McDaniel?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of that guy. Like that's what I think he'll be. I think he may have a little bit more upside, but I don't look at him and go, you're going to wreck my game plan. Byron Murphy, yeah, you can wreck my game plan. Grant, you could wreck my game plan. The two of you together wrecks my game plan. And that's where I'm going to be really interested to see. I saw Thomas's comment. He goes, look at Cincy with Higgins, Chase, and Burrow. That'll be an interesting experiment.
Should we do a little mock drafting, you guys?
I think so.
So here's what I thought we would do. I think we can get through this if we just kind of, don't take as much time as we normally do, because we like to talk about this stuff, and do 2 3-round mocks. And with one, we'll start with the first one where we just take the best offensive linemen that we like off the board first, and then we'll compare. And then the second one, we won't. We'll take another position, and then we'll kind of compare, right? And we'll see how the value on day 2 matches up with those other position groups. And what we can do is we'll get to the Seahawks spot, and then we'll kind of put it up to a vote. And if we get enough of a response from the people in the comments, we'll go with their pick. If not, we'll just we'll override it and do what we have to do, right?
I like it.
Using PFF for this one. Let's see. Can everybody see the screen okay? Nope. Let's fix this. Let's get this out of here. There we go. Learning how to do this podcasting thing finally. All right, so the Seahawks are at 18, and that's kind of funny. We just talked about this. Let's just see what's off the board. Pretty chalky. Carter, Ward, Membu to the Giants, which is interesting because he's been going 4 to the Patriots a lot. Patriots go Genty. So some of the order is a little weird, but all the usual suspects. Like that top 6 is pretty chalk. Campbell, Shamar Stewart, Tet McMillan, Mikael Williams, Jade Barron, Nick Emmanmori, 12 to the Cowboys. I know that's a big favorite among Seahawks fan base. Mike Green, Tyler Warren goes 14 to the Colts. That's kind of everybody's popular pick. Jahad Campbell goes to the Falcons at 15. Will Johnson goes 16 to the Cardinals. And then the Bengals snipe Donovan Ezeraku from us. But we're going to go offensive line in this one, right? So I
believe so, yeah.
Let's pull up tackles because sometimes they have guys that are projected as guard at tackle. So
Kelvin Banks.
So we got, first of all, let me just mention this. Josh Simmons is still there. I've seen him in a bunch of national mocks being taken by the Seahawks. Makes no sense to me. Has never played guard. There's no indication that he'd be good at guard. He's still coming off the major knee injury. I think he's the most talented tackle if he's healthy, but he's a left tackle only, in my opinion.
Yeah.
There's other guys I'd rather have. Kelvin Banks, kind of the opposite. He's played tackle. He might be adequate there, but he might be better at guard. Gray Zabel is there, can play guard and center. Heather Booker's a big fan, or is a big fan favorite. And then Donovan Jackson's probably the other guy that I would consider there, although I could see maybe Marcus Bowe sort of being an upset and really shooting up there because of his scheme fit and athleticism. So let's first ask this. What do you guys think? Which of the offensive linemen would be your favorite? Okay, so we got Zabel, not Booker. Okay. Booker's an interesting one because he's so good at what he does, which is maul and in a phone booth and beat guys up, and he's a leader. And even though he looked better in the movement drills at the combine than I thought he would, I just don't think he's an ideal scheme fit given the other choices that are available. So we've got 3 for Zabel, 1 for Banks, 1 for Jackson, 4 for Zay. It looks like great. It looks like the people have spoken.
Yeah, I still have reservations about Zabel. I get everyone's falling in love with him, but my biggest kind of fear with Zabel is level of talent he's played against. That is my biggest holdup. And I get and I understand like what he did at Senior Bowl. He looked good, but that is a very small sample size. And for me, like he's not going up against just guys that are his same age. He's going to be going up against guys that are now either in their 3rd, 4th, 5th year in the NFL. I don't want to take a guy at 18 that I'm going to look at and go, okay, cool. Christian Haynes is beating him out. LeMay is beating him out in like year 2. Like then it's a waste to me of an 18th pick. And I'm not saying he's not worthy of it.
Right.
I would be more in favor of trading back and taking Zabel, where when I look at like a Calvin Banks or a Booker, you look at the talent they've played against, their entirety of their college career has been the best of the best. That to me has more of a merit in some respects when we talk about live reps and tape matching what they do.
Yeah.
That's me. Like if you look at a lot of these guys that come out, and not just on the offensive line, but out of that program in particular, 2 quarterbacks that have come out of that program that went in the top 5 picks in both their draft years had a small period of success and then or no success really, and it basically washed out in Carson Wentz and Trey Lance.
So I was going to say that to your point, results out of NDSU have been mixed when it comes to offensive alignment, right? Like Dylan Radins has been a bust essentially. Jalen Sundell, a more decorated player, had a more decorated career than Gray Zabel did, started more games, was a 4-year starter. Zabel was not, although their profiles are similar in that they both kicked out to left tackle for their senior year and both won first-team All-American as left tackles. Excuse me. Cody Mock is really the only one who has kind of taken that step. I just think I think he's different. Let's do this, first of all, because I do think now, is that how you felt about Zabel all the way through? Or do you think you might be getting a little draft fatigue when it comes to Zabel?
I felt that way from when you and me even first talked about him at Senior Bowl.
Okay. Well,
I've always had this reservation. I think he is a good player. I just don't know if he's worthy of, like when I'm picking someone at 18, you think of Byron Murphy. When we took him last year,
right?
We all went, he's going to plug and play. And he's going to, as much as he didn't get the sacks, Byron Murphy was a force on that D-line last year that allowed Leonard Williams to get freed up and to do a lot of the things that he did. I don't want to have it where we're going into the start of the regular season and Gray Zabel's on the bench as an 18th overall pick. Like, you don't want that, because then you go, shit, okay, did we overjudge? And like, yeah, Christian Haynes ended up being better or whoever. I'd rather go in and go with Calvin Banks and, go like, hey, this guy, one, can, if we have a tackle issue, can kick out and be a good tackle. But at the same time, I know what his quality of play he's been against. So that is my whole scenario. If you want to go with Gray Zabel, I'm more of a trade back and take Zabel. I'll get that even somehow into a cool slogan.
We can look at that.
18, into a shirt or something that says I'm okay with Zabel, just trade back to get him. Because I think you can. Like, I look at when you see a guy like a Calvin Banks somehow make it there at 18, I think you have to potentially take that guy.
But here's the difference. I still have this queued up, by the way, so I'm going to play it. I didn't ever get to talk to Kelvin Banks. How would you assess your first day down here?
It was good. Got to come out and put the pads on and compete against guys, but there's going to be some stuff we got to clean up in film, hand placement, foot angles, all that stuff. So looking forward to getting to the film room and kind of clean up what was off.
Coming from the FCS level to best collection of talent college football has to offer, didn't seem like the game was too fast for you. How'd that feel today?
Yeah, it felt really well. NDSU prepares you for the next level and going against top dudes day in and day out. So coming down here, it was a good change of pace off the bat, but kind of settled in right away.
Played tackle and guard for the Bison, but I saw some center today. They're moving you all over the place. What did they tell you the plan was for you this week?
Could have played offensive line this week, so just put me in wherever and go and try and do my best and compete.
Any contact with the Seattle Seahawks yet?
I'm not for sure yet.
Okay. No, see, he hadn't then, but he did meet with him at the Combine. So let's go back here. We did get a suggestion to try and trade down. And if you look at their rankings here on PFF, Banks is 20, Zabel's 29. Then we get down to like Jackson 67. Should we see? No one's.
I think you could trade with the Chargers.
No one's offering a trade, but let's see.
Try the Chargers. Go to 22 and see how the board falls.
So we'll go to
be able to pick up a small pick in there.
Go to the Rich Hill trade chart real quick and punch in LA Chargers. See what their draft situation's like. They got some extra picks late. So it is a difference of 66 points to go from 22 to 18, which would give you their third, which is pick number 86, and their fifth, which is 158. So
that's fair.
You get yet another third.
Yep.
Let's do that. Let's go 86 and 158. So we'll go.
And don't forget, you can force this trade, Dan, because
it's one of the reasons I prefer the PFF.
Yeah.
See, they say they're not interested in trading for the pick, but we're going to force it anyway.
Yeah.
Because I think it's pretty realistic per the trade chart.
And they could come up and get a receiver or Loveland.
So that cost us Zabel and Donovan Jackson. So that's the gamble in moving back, right?
Did we trade out of the first round, Dan?
Wait a minute.
We did.
All right, let's re-queue this. God dang it.
Re-queue that, because I was like, wait a minute. We shouldn't go all the way out of the first round.
I did that right. I put 18.
18, but did you take their 22?
Yeah. Okay, we'll do this again. Hang on. Sorry, guys.
That's for me where it caught me up. I'm like, wait, how did we lose both? It shouldn't have happened that way. Someone should be sitting there. We only went 4 spots.
So we're sitting in the same spot. Josh Simmons has been taken, but all the same guys are there. Okay, so now let's do this again. And actually, the Jets at 42 are interested, but we're not gonna move.
No, screw the Jets.
So they're gonna give us 22,
18,
86, and 158. That's what I did. I forgot to hit 22.
And force the trade. There we go. Because even Zach says, he goes, you did 86 and 158 for 18. Okay, so who's left? Calvin Banks is still there.
Okay, then that's probably, let's see where.
So
Zabel is 2. So, okay, let's put it to a vote again because we've done that before,
we
right?
Made the trade. Everyone vote.
Banks, Zabel, or Donovan Jackson? Because Jackson, I think, is ranked way too low here at 67. I think he ends up going to the first round. I think he's that good. Here we go.
2 Banks already.
Okay.
Zabel.
They bought your argument, or maybe they just didn't like the mustache when I showed the quote. Wait, still not done. Okay, now Zabel pulls ahead. No, it's tied, 3-3. All right, we need a tiebreaker. Who's going to be the tiebreaker? Next one in, Banks. Bryce made a good argument. I do like Kelvin Banks. And here's the thing I like about him too. I think with all those other young guards that you have on the roster, he plays left guard as a rookie, right? Plays well, or right guard, whatever, but probably left because he's used to playing on the left side. And then you choose not to re-sign Abe Lucas next year, or
maybe
unfortunately, maybe Charles Cross goes down, gets hurt or whatever, you can kick Banks out there. He's perfectly capable of playing tackle in the NFL.
No, 100%. And that's the thing for me where when I look at this, I go, Banks, I think, gives you more of a hedge to move out to tackle if you have to. And not that I don't like Gray Zabel. I just don't think Gray Zabel can play tackle in the NFL.
In a pinch, kind of like Joe
pinch,
did,
yeah.
But not long term. Yeah.
No, he is not a long term. No. Where Calvin Banks, I can look at and go, hey, if we have to move off Charles Cross, we have a left tackle.
All right, so now we've gotten that one out of the way, and now we've added a pick in the third round. So now we have 5 picks. Now we have 6 picks in the top 92, and we have 5 picks remaining. We have 50, 52, 82, 86, and 92. So just kind of looking at the all tab here, right? See, Scott says, let's check out wide receiver. Obviously, I'm going to go there. But if Dominic says wide receiver, but look what's kind of predominantly at the top of the board here. Like there's Siobhan Ravel, there's Trey Amos. Those are starting caliber corners. And the corner class, there's Darian Porter. We might be able to double back and get him. I'll tell you this, my favorite receiver at this moment, and I've already said, I'm not done studying the class. I'm going to spend a lot more time doing that this weekend. At this moment, my favorite receiver for how he fits is Alec Iomanner out of Stanford. And he's sitting right there at 35. I think he blocks his ass off. I think he's an outside receiver. The contested catch stuff is good. The route running's good. I don't know how he kind of got lost in the shuffle. I think maybe because at the beginning of the process, he was kind of banged up. He couldn't go to the Senior Bowl. I don't think he did all the testing.
Is Jaden Higgins there?
Oh, I'm sure he is. Let me see.
He's my crush right now at receiver is Jaden Higgins.
Let's just go wide receiver. And then Jalen Royals too is another guy that I love. And then there's your Savion Williams. Now those guys are available later. Mm-hmm. So we could go a different direction.
Oh, what? Higgins isn't on the board?
Who?
Jaden Higgins is where'd he go?
Let's see.
Who sniped him? They're gonna be on my hate list right now.
The Chiefs at 31.
Kansas City.
That actually makes a ton of sense. That fits.
That makes a ridiculous amount of sense.
Yeah.
I don't want to see him become Mahomes' new favorite weapon. That's just going to terrorize the NFL more.
So let me ask everybody, do you guys like Iomanner enough? Or because you have this group here, right? You got Trey Harris, Jalen Knoll, Jalen Royals, Savion Williams, all kind of bunched up, and we've got 3 more picks till we get to the 80s. Should we see what else is out there? Trey Harris, Kevin. Corner's tempting, man. I mean, Trey Amos, I think, is a guy that can start right away. And then I've already talked about Ravel.
Who else is in that corner group in there right now there, Dan?
Let's go down and take a look at it as a whole, shall we? There's your Darian Porter, Benjamin
Morrison still there.
That's the medical. And I'll just say this. With the Seahawks and how much emphasis they put on the medical thing, this guy had a hip procedure in high school and another one in college. I bet he's off their board.
I think he is too. I think he's going to get the same treatment that Fatanu got last year.
See what I mean, though? If you don't get Amos, Ravel, or Porter here, you drop to like Kobe Bryant's 170 pounds. Quincy Riley's a slot guy. Like
Denzel Burke's there, but
there's Burke, but and that's a guy that one of the viewers mentioned earlier.
Thomas likes him a lot. Okay, so John McGrath just said check tight end.
It's a good call.
Yeah,
there's Arroyo, Taylor Ferguson. The whole second tier of that tight end class is available.
Do you know one guy that I've gotten more kind of fallen in love with a little bit more in this tight end class that I think will fit Kubiak's system? You want to take a guess?
Well, I think we've talked about Mitchell Evans before.
No, that's exactly who I'm thinking of as Mitchell Evans, Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I really like his fit, but he's a guy you can get in the mid rounds.
Yeah, and we can wait on tight end because look at the depth in this class, right?
Yeah.
Jackson Hawes is the stud blocker.
I think we go corner here. Corner and then come back to receiver because we're going to have one pick right after.
I think so too. I think it does give you the flexibility if you want to move Riq and there's a market for him. Or if you keep Riq, it gives you the possibility of of keeping Witherspoon, at least for now, in the slot and just doing everything that he can do from there. But it also, at worst, it sets you up if you don't want to extend Riq.
Exactly.
Amos or Ravel? I
think you go Ravel.
If Ravel's healthy, he's a top 15 pick.
Yep.
Agreed. Kevin Dominic says Ravel, and Kevin says Ravel, and so we're going to revel in this pick.
Yeah.
And then we only drop down 2 more spots, and so, well, first of all, let's look at all, because we have to consider the defensive front, right? And for some reason, they don't have a bunch of guys. Well, here's JT Tuamalo. There's Jack Sawyer, the 2 Ohio State guys. Shamar Turner, I don't think is on the board. He's got a rod in his leg. We've been there, done that with Darryl Jackson.
Darryl Taylor 2.0.
Darryl Taylor, yeah. Why do I say Darryl Jackson? Omar Norman Lott's more of just kind of a 3 technique only. I don't know if that's a fit. Boy, Alfred Collins, I think, is rated way too low here.
Yeah, he's a higher day 2 pick for me, like with what his fit is.
Your true nose tackle. He's a nose tackle all day.
I'm thinking of a guy right now. Oh, I can't remember his name. Is it Darius Alexander out of Toledo?
Oh, yeah.
That's who I'm wondering if he's.
For some reason they have ranked really low too. I am seeing a bunch of chatter with Jack Sawyer in which I like, because usually when I mention Jack Sawyer, people come at me with, oh, he's not twitchy enough. Like he's being pigeonholed, right? But another guy that I thought tested a lot better athletically at the combine than I expected, and just he's a culture setter. If you want to go Jack Sawyer, I wouldn't question that for a minute, because
no,
he's a guy you want in your locker room all day long.
He's I love ball guy.
But I think someone got him. Darius Alexander out of Toledo, a little bit older. Landon Jackson's another guy that I would give strong consideration. Tyleik Williams would have been in play here too.
Oh, there he is, Chicago.
Okay, yeah. Yep. So I mean, if you want to grab that stud nose tackle that you plug in next to his former teammate, or you can just go value later. There's guys like CJ West still here. He might be there later. Josh Farmer, although he's not a true nose. Jamari Caldwell. What do we got here? Trey Harris is my vote for this pick. Let's go back and look at receivers again. I think that might be a good call. There's Io Manor. Dude, Trey Harris is just so explosive. And such the after the catch stuff, because he missed some games last year, right?
He did, yeah, I believe so.
And his route tree leaves something to be desired. I don't know that I'm an Io Manor guy, but if you guys want to outvote me, and a Jalen Royals guy, those are my 2. Kevin Dante says Trey Harris. I've got 1 vote for Demetrius Knight, and then 2 votes for Jack Sawyer. Dude, I could do Jack Sawyer all day.
Well, we haven't really, we haven't addressed the defensive side. Like, we've got a corner, but we haven't addressed the trenches.
Like, Sawyer's a foundational guy. And I think his ceiling is he could be Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, I agree. He could be Trey Henderson or Sam Hubbard, who just retired. That's kind of what he could be.
Or any other white edge player who's he could be Grant Wistrom. He could be
Grant Wistrom. He could be Patrick Kearney. That's a better comp, I think, for Jack Sawyer's Patrick Kearney 2.0 here.
Yeah, but just a guy, it sets the edge.
Yeah,
like John McGrath says, coming up with big plays. Obviously, had that amazing walk-off kind of play to seal it in the national championship game. But a guy that's going to set the edge and play the run, but he's got some juice. He can get to the passer. He can drop into coverage, but he's going to be a locker room dude.
So now do we go receiver?
I think we have to in this grouping somehow in these next 10 picks. So now we got Jalen Royals, Savion Williams, Tez Johnson, Isaiah Bond, Torrey Horton, Pat Bryant. I know who I like the best here.
I think you go Jalen Royals.
Yeah. He's such a run after the catch guy. I think
he actually does block quite well.
His route running's good enough. And they call him a possession receiver here, but he ran a 4.3. He's much more explosive than I think people give him credit for. And I think people would love Jalen Royals. Boom. because also we promised to do this quickly and we're not very good.
Yeah, we're failing at that part, Dan. We always do when it comes to mocks.
So here we are. We've checked a bunch of big boxes, right? We've got Kelvin Banks, who's listed as a tackle here, but he's going to be a starting guard for us as a rookie. We have a starting quality and potentially a star quality outside corner. Jack Sawyer at edge, Jalen Royals at receiver. We've got 2 picks left.
Tight end. Gotta be. And I think you're taking, in my opinion here, you're taking Harold Fanning Jr. because he's a move tight end for you.
Really?
And we want a fullback type. I think he's that.
That
he
I can
is, in my opinion, I think he's the next version of Kyle Juszczyk.
Now, when we go to the fans, though, we've got Ferguson. Thomas Cox says, what about center? You're getting that on day 3. Like, there's so many good centers. Jackson Slater, Jake Majors, Clay Webb, Jonah Monheim. You can get a center on day 3, and also he's going to be your 3rd string center. Like, they're not moving off Olu and Sundell. There's a reason they didn't aggressively pursue anyone that can play center in free agency. Those are your guys. And so, that's it. All those other guys that I just mentioned can also play guard too. And so we're only going to do a 3-round mock today. That's a priority for me. And every mock I do on day 3 is to take one of those guys that can play both. We got a couple votes here for Ferguson. In fact, it's 3-1, but Fannin is interesting to me. He's kind of an awkward player. Like, he's got a weird running style, but the production's off the charts. Let's see if I remember it. 107 catches, 1,555 yards, 6 touchdowns, I think, at Bowling Green last year. But at the Senior Bowl, they did use him kind of as a fullback at times, and he was a good blocker. He's only 240 pounds. He's different than what they have, and for that reason, I think he might be really interesting. They haven't signed a fullback. They're gonna look in the draft or undrafted free agency at someone that can play fullback and be that chess piece.
Yeah, no, I agree with you there.
Even Zach says we have a Ferguson in Barner, similar player. I think that's a really good comp, Zach.
Yep.
We don't have a Fannin Jr. Let's do it.
I think he gives you that flexibility in your offense. He gives you something that's not necessarily there. And like I said, they split tight ends out in this offense, which means their 12 personnel could end up looking more like 11 if they bump that tight end out into the slot. Yeah.
Yeah. John says Fannin as fullback is interesting. You changed my mind, Dan. Yeah, there's some cool. Whoops. Well, I don't know what happened there. Oh, I see. Dominic wants Jared Wilson. He's not gonna play. I honestly believe that they believe that Oluwatimi is a very good center in their scheme, and I think they think Sundell's better. And I agree. I like Jared Wilson. I do. But when you talk about need and you talk about the way the roster is constructed right now, if he could play guard, which he's never done, okay. But again, that's why, like, I'm taking a guy on day 3 that can play center and guard. I'm taking one of those guys I mentioned.
Do you take Tate Ratledge here, Dan?
No, I think that's a poor use of resources.
Okay, so what are we going through with this last?
Because then someone is going to be, and I know, just add talent, throw talent at it, make it stick, right? But first of all, there's no way Tate Ratledge is lasting until pick 9.
No.
There's no way. He's a second-day pick all day, so that's not realistic. But
let's go nose tackle. I see John McGrath said nose tackle.
What about here?
Quarterback? So I look at that group that's left right in there. I don't think Quinn Ewers is there. I think he might be gone earlier.
Yeah, he's sounding like a second-round pick.
I think Tyler Shuck is going to be a second-round pick,
if not a first. I think. I don't know if he gets past Pittsburgh.
I think the reality of the ones that'll be sitting there is Kyle McCord, Riley Leonard, and Will Howard. And I will say this: I've been up and down on Leonard because I thought there were some limits in his game that came out in the college football playoff to an extent, and then I've seen what he's been doing in his, post, his draft season workups and stuff. I think his arm strength is good enough for the NFL. If he's in a system like a Clint Kubiak system, like a Kyle Shanahan, McVay type system, he throws timing routes very well.
How about this position? Because this falls off a cliff pretty hard too, but there's some interesting players
Billy
here.
Bowman.
Billy Bowman's fun. He's kind of an all or nothing player. Like, he either makes a play or he whiffs like dramatically. Andrew Makuba is a guy that I really, really like. Look at that PFF score for 2024, by the way, a 90. That's crazy. But it says his lacking run defense skill set may turn off some teams. See, I haven't watched a whole lot of film on him, so he's not going to fit. Lathan Ransom, toughness and tenacity are his calling cards, which he makes good use of in all facets of the game. There are some who believe that if he doesn't get hurt last year, that he's probably in the day 2 conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But if you just look at the overall, you look at the all list. Let's see. Oh God, Dominic, no, don't ever. No.
Oh, I saw that. I was just like, I was not happy.
No, he's not the player that you want him to be at 6'5", 345 pounds. He's not. He's just not. He gets knocked off his feet. He has a small base. Now, John does say check nose tackle, and that's why I was looking at CJ West. Like 6'2", 317 doesn't sound like a nose tackle, but he's a fun player.
This may not be a.
It's hard. We've checked so many boxes. Look at that. We got our guard. I do kind of want to. Any of the tackles that we really love kind of slip through. Not really. You can get Logan Brown later on.
Mm-hmm.
Jack Nelson. Do they think about running back here?
That's what I was going to say.
This is
Damian Martinez is right there.
This is such a great class. Or what about a guy like Jadon Blue, who some people have comped him because of his pass receiving skills to Alvin Kamara. Just an outstanding pass catcher. I don't know though. That's a little rich for running back, isn't it?
I think it's a little rich in this class. What about edge? Is there any other edges in there? I know we took 2. Okay, Dan. What about off-ball linebacker? What is still sitting there at this current rate? I know it's a little early.
It's a good call because this is where it falls off. So there's Jeffrey Bossa. Barrett Carter Clemson. Gosh. Is he just getting by on name only, though? Athletic, versatile defender can be a valuable chess piece for a defense to weak side lineman. What are his coverage grades? Run defense grade 82, coverage grade 47. Yeesh. Hey, there's a guy Stutzman.
Yeah, what's Stutzman? That's the thing where tape to what we, see, like this is where he's more of a downhill guy. Like that's where I think if you're going to take a linebacker here, it might be Bass out of Oregon.
Bass is a guy that like I really liked him at the Senior Bowl. I kind of got sucked into like his physique. Like he's just rocked up and he moves really well. But he's a guy that played Mike for the Ducks. He's not going to play that in the NFL. He's a little undersized. Are his coverage skills good enough? Like I've always kind of felt when I'm watching him, like he leaves me wanting a little bit more. Former safety though. So those instincts.
I think he would be a perfect Tyrese Knight backup.
And he could play Mike in a pinch too. He has that.
Yeah, he could if you needed to. Like
you guys.
So
like
you
that?
look at what was his coverage grade though, Dan?
We've got.
Oh, there we go. It was right there, 70.
Yeah.
So he's a very balanced. Like I think that's the pick if we're going to take a linebacker right now.
We've got a couple of votes for Kaiser. What do you guys think of Bossa? Here's Kevin saying Bossa was my favorite Oregon defensive player. John says Bossa or Kaiser. Dominic says Pegues. Oh, he knows he's a draft crush of mine, but is this a little too early for him?
I think this might be a little too early. I think he's a 4th or 5th round guy.
Yeah, there he is at 124. And if we were continuing this, we might have a shot at him because he can play fullback. That's cool. I think I'm cool with Bossa. Like I think being a former safety, like I think that's going to carry a lot of appeal because when we talked about at the top of the show how McDonald in Baltimore used 3 linebackers. Right. Sometimes he'll use a 3rd linebacker as that big slot as opposed to a 3rd safety. Yeah, I like it. I mean, Kaiser's good too. I think, John, we could go either way on this. But I think Bossa has just a little bit better athletic upside. But I could honestly go either way with this. So taking offensive line in the 1st round, this is what we got. We have our left guard, hopefully for the next 10 years, right? But a guy that can play tackle if you need him to. We got a guy at 50 in Ravel, and I'm not so sure he doesn't get to 50, depending on the medicals, who, if he's healthy, is a top 15 pick. We have Sawyer. We talked at length about him. Jalen Royals gives you just a really cool outside. He can play inside or outside, but he's also a guy that could take handoffs and take some jet sweeps. Yep. Harold Fannin, another versatile piece where he's not really your true two-way tight end, but a guy that can play H-back and some fullback. And then Jeffrey Bossa, a guy that can back up. Probably be an upgrade over Drake Thomas. He's certainly bigger than Thomas, but a guy that, like Thomas, can play Mike and Will if you need him to, right? So let me download this and save it so that we can compare them afterwards here. Let's go O-line first pick. All right. Then we're going to do it again. Now, if any of you, and I think they've been watching me long enough, they know, and I also talked about it. Some people would look at this draft and go, only one offensive lineman? Are you nuts? Again, I'm taking 2 on day 3. I'm taking one of those guys from that group that I mentioned that can play guard or center and has starter upside at both. And then I'm taking a developmental swing tackle. I'm taking Jack Nelson or Logan Brown or Jordan Travis. I'm taking one of those guys to compete with Mike Jarrell to be like the young kind of developmental tackle. All right, let's do it again. 3-round draft, Seahawks, boom. We can't take an offensive lineman this time. Start draft.
Can we get the Dominic's thing removed there, Dan, so I can see a little?
Oh yeah. Sorry about that. Oop.
All good.
My bad. Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, so already, boy, there's some choices there. Like
Will Johnson's there.
Malachi Starks is there. I think Starks, McDonald would love Starks. Kenneth Grant is there. And then Colson Loveland is still there. Like it or not, you guys, if Colson Loveland would be in play at 18.
Oh, he would be, but it's coming. Everyone's going Johnson so far in Grant.
Yeah, and I get that. I do. I don't think they go corner this early. I know I said it. I know I said it's a possibility, but
if Will Johnson's sitting there, though, Dan, that might be the exception. Like
maybe.
The only reason I say that is the familiarity for Mike McDonald with Will Johnson, because he probably was part of the recruiting group that got Will Johnson to Michigan.
Yeah. It was 2021 that he was at. They only go back 3 years.
Yeah, they only go back 3 years, but he would have been part of the group that recruited him.
Long, lean cornerback with elite foot quickness, change of direction, fluidity. His limited long speed will create questions about his man coverage reliability, but having him play off coverage with his eyes on the ball as a zone scheme wide corner could allow him to make impactful plays more often. Maybe that's why he slips, theoretically, is there's some questions about his ability to play press man. How many? Yeah, we got a lot of votes for Grant here. I mean, you know me, that's, I think for the purposes of showing like what could happen if you don't go offensive line in the first round and check a big, huge box at a position of need that falls off for me after day 2. Should we go Kenneth Grant here?
I think so. You can go Grant or Johnson, either one.
Man, you put Grant next to Murphy and you imagine you fast forward 2 years. Holy crap, right?
Yep. All right. What do we got so no O-line, right?
Just on the first pick. That's it. That's all. It was just
so let's see what's on the O-line now. Let's just see what.
Well, I think we know who's going to be there. This guy right here.
Yeah, he's not the one what about O-tackle?
PFF,
to see if there's any of our guys that are switch players.
There's one in particular. Okay. So
Marcus Mbu is the one for me there.
So he's really intriguing because even though they have him listed as a tackle, and even though in Mobile they kept him at tackle, even though he's 6'5" and barely 300 pounds, small, struggles with NFL level strength and pass protection, but he's so quick and athletic.
Yep.
And has some of the most fun hand placement. He's got this thing he does. I haven't even come up with a name. It's haymaker, basically. If he has you going one direction and you're going the direction he wants you to go, there's so many reps on tape where he just like clubs you from the back to just keep
I've
you
seen
going
that, yeah.
It's a thing. You see it all throughout his tape, but you move him to guard or even center, some people feel like, and he's a zone scheme fit all day. I'm more intrigued now by Jonas Avenaya since because we kind of all saw it in Mobile. Like, even though he's got some good tape at right tackle at Arizona, struggled a little bit with quickness and speed on the outside. But he comes out yesterday, I think. Was it after their pro day?
Yeah.
And he said, you never hear this, right? He said, I would prefer to play guard in the NFL. Like, you just don't hear that. Most of the guys that are tweeners, they want to stay at tackle because that's where the money is.
I think if you were to get Savania and pair him with Charles Cross on the left side and have Christian Haynes take over on the right side, I think you have, and Olu's continues to improve, you have a very good looking offensive line.
Well, let's put it out to a vote, and it's all over the place. Because I was going to say, are we overthinking this though? Because isn't Tate Ratledge kind of the perfect fit? Like, not just from a physical standpoint, like guy can maul in a phone booth, but he can get out to the second level. But just the anger that he plays the game with.
What's the age?
It's a good question. I don't think he's one of those overaged guys. Let's see. Oh, he is. Oh, why did I not know that?
Yeah, I thought he was.
Huh. Where so Marcus Bowe, I think Bowe is one of the younger guys. Where'd he go? Where did he go?
Oh, Bowe, you just missed him.
Oh, because they have him as a tackle.
So he's
21.
And what's Savania? I think he's around the same age.
Yeah, but between those two, I'm taking Bowe. He's just so athletic.
Well, they don't even have Savania's age.
Yeah, he's ageless.
Now, the only thing that I'll say about Savania that I like more than Bowe on this, he has a nasty streak.
So does Wyatt Milam, who's
I just don't like his feet. His feet scare me.
As a tackle, I don't. Yeah, he does that backpedal thing in his pass, right? But
even as a guard, he'd still be doing.
Look at his sack numbers. He hasn't given up a single sack ever in college. He's only given up.
Also, I'll say this: I will tag it with West Virginia's offense is very quick pass.
Look at his zone. Look at his zone.
Get the ball out quick.
Look at his true pass set pass block grade. That's wow.
Okay, now I'm curious on what Savania's age is.
Yeah, right. See if you can find it.
I'm gonna find it right now because that's something I'm like, I want to know.
It kind of seems like the crowd wants Jonas Savania has the most votes.
Okay, well, I'm good with that.
Now, I would tend to think that the first place you would try him is right guard. I just think that, it's an easier transition when a guy's played right tackle his entire career. And let me check that actually. See if he's played any guard at Arizona. Oh, look at that. He's played actually in 2024. They must have had an injury issue. Played half of his snaps on the right side, half on the left side as a tackle. 2022 is the starting right guard. He got 790 snaps. So I think you start him on the right side, and then maybe we saw Christian Haynes play some left side last year in the preseason. I thought it looked good.
Yeah.
I think Savania wins the vote. Oh, wait. Someone said, is Savania 24? Also?
I'm looking right now to try and find out. He's listed as a junior. Okay, I get that. Where's his age? It doesn't even give me his birth date. It's like
it's not even on Wikipedia. That's probably where PFF pulls it from. Like, what the hell is his? Okay, that's a little. It's almost like when the Mariners signed like an international prospect. It used to be a problem, right? Where a guy would like falsify his paperwork, and you think he's 18. And he's
okay. So even if I go to the University of Arizona's page, gives me his weight, everything. It does not give me where he was, like his birth year.
But let's see. Remember okay, so he wasn't a transfer. He was a freshman in 2022, so he's only played 3 years.
Yeah, so he's going to be the same age. He's going to be young.
Yeah. You guys like Savania then?
I think so. I think he's going to bring some nasty to it.
Okay. John says thought he was 24. Zach says thought he was 24, but he's coming out after his third year. He's like an old school prospect declaring after his third year. He was a true freshman in 2022, and he didn't transfer. You guys want to? Let's just do it. Savania it is. And his footwork's really good. Like his pass protection footwork. And so taking him off the edge where he doesn't have to deal with that and putting him inside, I think he can be a beast. And he runs well for his size. All right, so just 2 picks later, now we're at 52. We checked our 2 trench spots, right? Our 2 biggest needs. Okay, there you go. Scott says he's 21, found his age. Yeah, thank you, Scott. Boom, right there. Good. Give him credit for that.
Thank you, Scott.
So now we can let the board come to us. We don't want to take the same players we did last time. How would you guys feel if we took Io Manor here?
Ooh.
But think about this too, and he's young too. The tape is so good. And like, does Doug Baldwin have any say in the building? Right?
It's fair. It's a fair thing.
Because otherwise you got the same kind of group here. Braden Swinson's got some character issues, so I'm a little concerned there about edge. Could do the tight end here. Could go Arroyo or Mason. If you want to do something a little bit different this time around. We could do Alfred Collins here. Nope, we already took Grant. Demetrius Knight's a guy that I love. I just don't. I don't think he's a guy that can play will and strong. I think he's a Mike only. So I'm not a huge fan of him there. They're not taking Cam Scadaboo at 52. Pete's not here anymore. We could go with the other Ohio State edge if you want to add an edge and go JT Tuimalu, who's a very similar player in a lot of ways. Like, you look at his production, and he's a bigger edge. Let's see, go back here, and 15 sacks in he had 11 sacks combined in his freshman and sophomore year, and then as a junior, 15 sacks, 14 quarterback hits, 22 hurries after 29 hurries as a sophomore. Run defense grade 88. Pass rush grade's good. I mean, that's a possibility. Let's see what we're finding here. Trenches all the way until the 60s. Trey Harris would be a dream pick.
How many picks do we have left here, Dan? We got 2? 3.
Yeah, we didn't trade.
I say go receiver here.
Now, here's a guy that you mentioned.
I know. I really love Carson Schlesinger. Like, I really do.
Says he's light for an NFL linebacker, but I think that kind of plays into, if he's a guy that could be a third linebacker, plays like he weighs 240, they said, gives defenses everything he has on every snap. It doesn't do so recklessly. Motor runs hot. Discipline and fundamentals are there. Despite only 1 year as a starter, elite processing speed and understanding of the game. He's kind of built like a big safety. I kind of feel like he could fit as a
So
third
here's
linebacker.
my question. How much do you think Ernest Jones weighs?
He's barely 230, isn't he?
He is 230. So you're getting a guy that's the same weight.
Yeah. How would you guys feel about Schlesinger here? Like,
I think Schlesinger might be a really nice pick here.
And I also think not Demetrius, we just talked about him. I think Tyrese Knight is a little bit longer player. I think he can, and he did at UTEP. I think he could play some edge, like as a third linebacker too. You got Schlesinger maybe as the weak side guy with Jones. You have 2 elite, like instinctive guys that can come up and hit, but also can cover. Maybe you use Knight sort of.
Well, you think Knight's only 233. He's 3 pounds heavier. Their linebackers in Seattle are not thumpers. They are cleanup crews.
I really like this idea, and I haven't been able to do a mock this entire season where I take Schlesinger because it just hasn't made sense.
Let's take Schlesinger. I'm for it.
Yeah, Thomas says Schlesinger would be good. Rockman Drum says Chris Paul Jr. He'd be a fun one too. But let's go Schlesinger because I think that's another guy that that's probably a little bit lower than most people expect. So you could say good value on that one. So just checking back in again. So we've got our. God, I love Kenneth Grant. I would give anything to see him and Murphy play side by side for the next 10 years. Savania is your guard, and then Carson Schlesinger. Do we look at receiver and corner now? Kind of like or tight end, corner. Oh, Kevin says Mason Taylor. Ooh, that'd be exciting. Let's see how the tight ends look. We got Mason Taylor, Terrence Ferguson are still left on the board. And then you said corner. We kind of missed out on the heart of the corner class by waiting. And that's why I was saying earlier, expect one potentially in those first 3 picks because look how it's falling off.
Yeah, they fall off hard.
I'm not taking one of those guys.
Mason Taylor, then. Go with my tight end, Mason Taylor.
Do that. Yeah, there we go. And he's the winner in the votes, too. Here we go. Kevin, Mason Taylor, John Taylor, Thomas Cox Taylor. Boom. Okay. And he's
I'd rather be flying an X-Wings comment right there.
John's going to take yours here. Hey, he could. And if he doesn't, then maybe he takes him here at 92. We got to go receiver here, right? Before we lose out on all those guys. Do we take Savion Williams? Because we know he's coming in for a 30 visit.
Oh, gosh.
Or do you go Isaiah Bond?
What do the quarterbacks look like?
It's that same group.
Quinn Ewers is there.
Wait. Yeah, he is. Let's stay away from quarterback. What do you guys think? Okay, we got 2 votes for Savion, 1 for Bond.
I'm not a Bond fan. Like I've watched him and I can't get excited about him go back to the receivers, Dan. Let's just see what's fully there. Pat Bryant's interesting to me out of Illinois.
6'3", 200, lacks the top-tier athletic qualities to be a day-one outside receiver, but he possesses a strong build, good hands, reliable blocking. He had
blocking.
Catch. Did he catch that ball from Elgersma in the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, it's down the sideline.
Yeah. That was a great throw.
The key thing that I like about Pat Bryant is his blocking. He is very good at blocking.
Really?
Yes.
Torrey Horton's another guy I know he's getting a lot of love. I think he's a little bit older. Oh, they don't list his age. Just a really well-rounded receiver, really productive, as you can see there.
Mm-hmm. What does it say in the first look thing? Does it have anything
for age?
No,
just says a lot to like about his game, including his nuance, pride in the little things, competitiveness, sure hands. If you can look past his athletic drawbacks, limited long speed and agility, he projects a mid-round possession receiver. They're probably looking for someone to take the top off a little bit more, don't you?
Well, you've got MVS for that.
Yeah, he's 31 years old.
True, but you can always find that guy. And
Royals is a 4-3 guy.
Yeah, but that's where I look at it and I go, again, in this offense, it's never been about having a burner. Like it's a gadget. Your burner becomes your gadget in this offense.
All right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 votes for Savion, 1 for Bryant, 1 for Bond, and 1 for Tez Johnson. Ooh, 150 pounds. I don't know about that. Yeah, I'd rather take, like, Tez Johnson's fun. I would take Kyle Williams over Tez Johnson.
Yep, totally agree with you. I'd take Ricky White over Tez Johnson, to be honest.
Let's go Savion here because it's what the people want.
Okay.
And it's because, it's current, it's topical. We know that he's coming in for a 30 visit, right? So let's see.
They do not like our Jonas 7-9 pick.
Well, PFF only grades based on where you pick him in relation to where they have him ranked. You can never take a guy higher than they have him ranked and get a good grade. Kenneth Grant, Jonas Avenaya as your right guard, presumably, Carson Schweschinger, Mason Taylor, the tight end, Savion Williams, or let me go back to this. I don't think it'll come up on the screen, but I can give it to you here. Whoops, that's not the right one. Oh, that's right. I went. Why is that not? Okay. Oh, it's not. Shoot, it's not pulling up my. I had saved that file so I could compare it. Sorry, you guys. Hang on one second here. That's weird. Why did it save it that way? No, that's not. Huh. Well, now I can't find it. Gosh darn it. Sorry about that. It's like a corrupted file or something. It's I go to pull it up and it says Mock Draft Simulator is experiencing some technical difficulties.
Oh, goody. We broke the system.
Right. I like both these drafts though. Mm-hmm. And I do think I like the way we ended up structuring the first one, and shout out to whoever suggested it in the chat. But and I do think it kind of fits into my point a little bit in that the depth of the offensive line group is so good that you can it does present a really cool opportunity there to trade down and pick up yet another late day 3 pick and bunch up another one there. I do think if that happens in real life, a quarterback's probably involved. Like if you end up with a bunch of 3 picks, between 80 and 92 in the 3rd round, you're taking a quarterback there because that's where that group ends up usually.
So it's funny because I did a draft down on the Pro Football Network one, and I traded 18 for 22. That's all it would let me do, is just a straight swap between us and the Chargers.
Yeah.
And I ended up with Jalen Walker, Kenneth Grant, because he fell in this simulator, and I took him, which I ended up with Embu at 52, Jalen Noel at 82, Darius Alexander at 92, which I was shocked by. And then I got my offensive line in Luke Kandra at 137, Sebastian Castro at 172. And then I finally took a quarterback at 175, which was Riley Leonard. And then I ended up with Jackson Hawes and Jaquavius Marks from USC as my running back. I took at 234.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, he's a fun little 3rd down back kind of.
Exactly why I took him, yeah.
Here we go. Dominic, thank you. Banks, Revel,
yeah,
Sawyer, Royals, Fannin, Bossa, or
our last one. I think personally I like our first one better.
Oh, I've got the screen's all weird. I do too. You get the extra player, you get the sure thing in the 1st round, although I just think Kenneth Grant's upside is so massive.
Oh, it's huge.
And then, so we didn't take in that event. Like if we were going to do this one, right, then we'd go into day 3 looking for, like I said, or at least my checklist would be another interior guy that can play center and guard, and then a guy that can play swing tackle, like another young developmental tackle. Like just layer yourself. Just come out of this draft with where you almost don't have to touch offensive line for the next couple of years if you don't want to, especially if you bring Lucas and Crossback, right? And so those are priorities in this case. What else are we missing? And I'm taking a running back and some other stuff, right? And a safety. But if you go back to that other one, Grant, Savania, Schlesinger, Taylor, Williams, I don't know, kind of the same set of needs going into day 3, right?
Yep, it is. It's cool. The Seahawks, regardless, need to do a job of stacking up the cupboard.
Yeah.
And start relying on scheme and coaching. And it was funny, Dan, because I was listening to your show and it was a comment about Sam Howell and how he, struggled in last year when we saw him and the year before in Washington, and he did a drop back rate of 70%. Well, that was our offense last year with Ryan Grubb. It was almost the Eric Bieniemy offense all over again.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways. Like it was the scheme, the style, everything. Abandon the run. We're chucking it deep. Like those were kind of the MOs of Ryan Grubb, which is why he's no longer in the NFL, period.
Right.
And why I don't know if he'll ever get another shot unless he can show in college that he can be balanced.
Yeah. Maybe as a pass game coordinator or a quarterback coach, but I don't think he'll ever be an OC in the league again. And he probably doesn't even want to after that experience. Like just stick to the college game. Maybe he gets a head coaching gig, if he has some success. Look at all the careers that have been resurrected by Nick Saban, bringing like failed guys back to be his OC, and then they go on. He did it with Kiffin. He did it with Sarkisian. He did it with Bill O'Brien.
Mm-hmm.
Tommy Reed. Like he just brings all these guys back that fail elsewhere, and he's like, "Come back." Belichick has done that too. He's like, "I'll be my OC for a couple of years, and then you can get a head coaching job." So we'll see. He might. I don't know. He might. I'm not shocked he went to Alabama. Obviously, there's a fit there, but I kind of thought maybe he wouldn't, because now he's just going to be pigeonholed as
DeBoer's guy,
or was it DeBoer?
Yeah.
Right?
No, exactly. And that's going to be, that's where it's interesting that Scott Huff was able to stay in the NFL, but he had to go back to what he had originally coached, which was tight ends with McVay, which is smart. I think that gives him an opportunity to potentially get back into being an O-line coach at some point and moving forward. But the thing that I found most interesting about DK's comments about Grubb in that podcast was how DK actually took it upon himself with Tyler to kind of fill Russ's shoes of watching film and taking notes, and how Grubb basically kind of kiboshed that and took their passion away from doing it. Like that they were just like, yeah, we're not doing this because you're not going to listen to us anyways. That's one of the things where I look at it and I go, like, that's where the college mindset doesn't work in the NFL. Like, you have to look at these players in the NFL as not necessarily, like, kind of, as equals in a way. Like, they've played in the league for 6 years and you're coming in with, yes, a lot of college experience, but no pro experience.
Yeah. And I think the actions didn't match the words. You know, when he was hired and we first heard from him, he would tell us that we got to find out what we're good at. And then once we find out what we're good at, then we'll lean into that and we'll figure out where to put our players. And he never followed up. He never like fulfilled that promise. He just constantly put his players in a position to fail. Like, they were among the league leaders in leaving their tackles on an island, even when we were having to run Stone Forsythe and Michael Jarrell out there, and they were ill prepared and they just couldn't handle speed off the edge. He didn't help him out. He didn't help him with 12 personnel. He was way too slow to go to more under center, more play action to help out Gino. The run game, he just never dialed it in. They were almost 50-50 gap and zone, and not because they were so good at either one they wanted to keep you off guard. They just could never figure it out, which leads to kind of my final point about the offensive line. I think what's really, really important this year isn't just making sure we have a group of talent to draw from and try and find the best 5 from, but also picking that 5 as soon as you can. Because last year I just thought they were way too wishy-washy with it. They moved guys around way too much, and it just didn't give them an opportunity to build that kind of continuity. And now the experience in this coaching staff, I just feel like by the time training camp starts, you need to take all the information that you've gathered during OTAs and seeing these guys work and move guys around if you want to, and then make decisions, keep them there, and try to settle on that starting 5 as soon as you can. Obviously, you're not going to pick it day one, but at least figure out where guys fit best and leave them there. I think that gives us the best chance that we can to get a good 5 out of there, or a good 3. We know what we're talking about here, and then teach them that scheme, because the scheme is going to be much, 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 much better than what we've had in the past.
I think the other big factor in this is that you now have tape, practice tape, game tape on Christian Haynes in the NFL, and Lamea and Olu and Sundell and all these guys. So for when John Benton and Rick Dennison get in here and they go, okay, what do we have? They already have an idea of what they are expecting to see come OTAs, and can then make judgment calls off of that, going, yeah, you know what we saw in the practice film and the game film of Christian Haynes, he's more of a left guard at the NFL level than he is a right guard, for say. So I agree with you, Dan. Like, stick to it, go with it, and just get this going in the right direction.
Well, 2.5 hours later. Now I will say this. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. We got 500 or so in here now. This is my first time doing a members only live stream. Clearly it's not members only. I believe for that to happen, I can only stream to the YouTube channel, but by making it available to Twitter, I think everybody was able to tune in. Because right now we've got 529 people alone just watching from Twitter. So thank you to you guys for tuning in. This was a fun Friday night, and for taking time away from March Madness or whatever you have going on Friday night and joining us. It means a lot to me. Thank you, Bryce, for popping in as a mystery surprise guest and then hanging out for 2.5 hours.
Love to do it.
I like this. Okay, we could do this. You just gave me an idea. I'll work that into the tiers. Okay. John says, thanks, lots of fun. John, I got to tell you, every time your name pops up, I think about, and you've probably gotten this before, but there was a guy named John McGrath who covered Husky football and Seahawks football for a long, long time as a beat writer. I think he worked for the News Tribune or the PI.
I think so, yeah.
And so when you started popping up in the feeds, I thought, is that the John McGrath that covered the team for 20 years? You're not that guy, are you? I don't think you are. But anyway, it's always great to have you guys here. I am going to take tomorrow off unless there's some massive breaking news, which I don't expect. I do find it this interesting, Bryce. One more thing before we go. Something that Schneider said yesterday kind of perked my ears up. When he's talking about the offensive line again, and how particular they're being, they want to make sure they get the right guy. If they're going to spend money, and again, that plays into the fact they like what they have on hand. They've drafted a lot of those guys over the last few years, and the new coaching staff likes them too. He said, we had 5 guys in this week, right? But all that was reported was Jenkins, Patrick, and Radens.
Mm-hmm.
So who are the other 2? And then he said, we have another guy coming in this weekend. So who's that? Like, so maybe there's still a veteran out there that would make some sense, right? That they could sign. I mean, let's take a peek real quick, I guess. Let's look at free agency tracker on Over the Cap. Right guard, center, left guard. Although I don't think they're in the market for a center. Unrestricted free agents. No. Shane Lemieux, I've thought about. He's still only 28. He's a guy that played at Oregon. I remember scouting him pretty extensively when he came out because the Seahawks were always in need of centers. They have him listed as a left guard, but he played center at Oregon. Obviously played for Clint Kubiak next year. Maybe he's a depth piece. Played for the veteran minimum last year. So maybe he's one of them. Let's see. I'm trying to keep the ages kind of younger. God, Mark Glowinski is still listed here. I thought he retired.
There's not a lot, Dan.
We've already been down the road with Nick Harris before. Dalton Reisner's an interesting guy. He's a guy that was considered one of the better young guards in the game a couple years ago, and then for whatever reason, just can't get more than a 1-year deal. But again, a guy that the Vikings moved on from, right? But maybe he's one that makes some sense just as someone to bring to camp for cheap and on a prove-it deal and let him compete.
Anyone you're signing now is a stopgap Lincoln Tomlinson type, hopefully with a better production. But what this tells me is they're banking more on the draft and the guys in house than they are on the free agent market.
I have to believe, because when you look at the list, there's only one guy on this list that played more than 88% of the snaps for his team last year, and that's Brandon Scherf. So there's 2 mystery linemen that visited this week we don't know about, and there's one coming in this weekend. Scherf has to be one of those guys.
I would assume so, yeah.
And he's a guy that I would think would fit the profile. Like he's been I think he's a 5-time Pro Bowler. He former high draft pick. He was the number 5 pick overall in 2015. But he's really struggled as a run blocker the last couple of years. Plus, I think he was available for anyone to take at the trade deadline, probably for a 7th, 6th round pick last year. Seahawks had a need, didn't do it then. So I don't know. Maybe you came up with an idea today, though. So let me take a look. Let's go back to the tracker and look at tackles.
Oh boy!
All right, and just look at tackles. So you suggested the tackles kind of opens things up a little bit more. Tyron Smith is a guy, but he's 35 years old now. There's Dylan Radens, still just 27. I think he makes a lot of sense, honestly. Like, yeah, there's some bad reps that got circulated on Twitter as soon as that was announced. But he's also a guy that had never played on the right side before. And some guys can't. I remember Taylor Lewan talking about how in his interviews during the draft process, he said, yeah, I can play the right side. And he said, no, I couldn't. I just, I was trying to put my best foot forward. But Radens is a guy that maybe you try him at left guard, you sign him to a vet minimum deal, whatever. He's still just 27 years old. He might make some sense. But your idea was Jedrick Willis, former 1st round draft pick from the Browns as a tackle. Hasn't played guard at the NFL level, but super athletic. That's why he was drafted so high. Still just 26 years old. Like, maybe you do just grab one of those guys and throw them on the pile and see if they can make something of it, but there's not much out there. Not at all.
So you're really digging through a lot of dirt to try and find a gem, and it's not going to be a good looking gem, I don't think.
Yeah. All right, let's wrap this up before we get to 3 hours, because I don't want to do that. All right. Thanks, Brett. Here, we got it. Hold on. I've got a reputation to uphold. All right, guys, thank you, everyone, for contributing. If you do want to be a member or support the show in any other way, those Links are down in the description. That's Bryce. Check out the Hawk Zone Rundown podcast, now affiliated with the Field Goals website. Follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Follow you at
Bryce Coots _HZR on Twitter.
for Hawk Zone Rundown. There you go. Forever and always go Hawks. Thanks, you guys.